Thank you very much. We're very honored tonight to have with us Medfield High School Chamber String Ensemble, directed by Brenna Evans. A fantastic job. As we all know, the Medfield High School music program is an outstanding reflection on our community, the birthplace of Lowell Mason. So I want to thank Brenna, to Doug Olson, and to all of your colleagues for doing a wonderful job. And thank you very much tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, good evening and welcome to our 2018 Annual Town Meeting. I am Scott McDermott, your town moderator. And I'm once again honored to be here tonight to preside over Medfield's annual town meeting. And I want to thank all of you for being here. By your presence, you will now be serving as a valued member of Medfield's legislative body. Tonight, we will be making laws and determining budgets. You are part of an amazing heritage that extends back to 1651. So thank you for being here tonight to undertake the important and the hard work of building a great community. I'm advised by our town clerk that we have a quorum present. Tonight we have 46 articles to address as the legislative body of the town of Medfield. I'm now going to ask our town clerk to read the return of service of the warrant.
By virtue of this warrant, I have notified and warned. I have notified and warn the inhabitants of the town of Medfield qualified to vote in elections and at town meetings by posting the tested copies of same at 5 public places 7 days before the date of elections as within directed. Constable John Geary, dated April 19th, 2018.
Thank you. I'm honored to invite all the veterans in attendance to please stand so we can acknowledge your service. Thank you. And our Pledge of Allegiance tonight is going to be led by John Cogan, who is our new Veterans Agent. So, please stand.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag.
of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, and welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Please remain standing. We go through this every year. We're now going to have the national anthem. It's going to be sung by Thrills and Chills. This is a great group from Eva Kendrick's voice studio. Emily, Kaya, Maria, and Emily are going to sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see? By the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare
Thank you. Please remain standing. Thank you very much. Please remain standing if you would. Now, out of appreciation and respect, I ask the town meeting to observe a brief moment of silence in memory of the following volunteers and contributors to the community of Medfield. Patrick Caulfield, who was a police officer for 25 years. Harry T. Mitchell III, Tracy Mitchell, Volunteer Fire Department, Cemetery Commission, Burial Agent, Committee to Study Hunting, Housing Authority, and Trust Fund Commissioner. John P. O'Toole was a Housing Authority member, Building Inspector, Blasting Study Committee, Enforcement Officer for Zoning, Field Driver and Offense Viewer, and retired in 2004. Dorcas Owen was the Assistant Town Clerk and was on the Memorial Day Committee. Carl J. Melia was on the Building Code Committee, Adult Community Center Study Committee, and the Solid Waste Study Committee. And for all of our other friends and neighbors who passed away in the months since our last annual town meeting, let's pause to remember. Thank you. Thank you. Now you may be seated. Thanks. So now on to the introductions of our town officials on the stage. First, I have the honor of introducing, to my right, our town clerk, Carol Mayer. And then, consistent with our tradition, I would ask the chairperson of the Board of Selectmen, Michael Marcucci, to introduce the executive branch of our government.
Thank you, Scott. Next to Ms. Mayer is Mark Sorrell, Town Council. Next to Mr. Sorrell is Evelyn Clark, Assistant to the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator. Next to Ms. Clark is Christine Truweiler, Assistant Town Administrator. Next to Ms. Truweiler is Michael Sullivan, Town Administrator. To my right, Selectman Gus Murby and Selectman Pete Peterson.
And to my left, I would ask Tom Marie, Chairperson of the Warrant Committee, to introduce the members of the Warrant Committee.
To my left, Sharon Tatro. To Sharon Tatro's left, Joanna Hilbert. To Joanna Hilbert's left, Mike Pastore. To Mike Pastore's left, Tom Mulvoy. To Tom Mulvoy's left, Barbara Gibbs. To Barbara Gibbs' left, Abby Marble. To Abby Marble's left, Nick Athanasiades. And to Nick Athanasiades' left, Jack Wolf.
Thank you. At this time, I will make a motion to permit non-voting participants to sit within the town meeting and to speak to the community as requested. We reserve a special visitors section over here for the meeting for this purpose. If you're not a registered voter and you're anywhere out there, please move over to our visitor section. And other than that, I'm going to ask Evelyn Clark, the Administrative Secretary to the Board of Selectmen, to read the name of our visitors.
Jeffrey Marsden, Superintendent of Schools. Christine Trierweiler, Assistant Town Administrator. Robert Hollingshead, Interim Fire Chief. William Carico, newly appointed Fire Chief. Jerry McCarty, Facilities Director. Maurice Goulet, Director of Public Works. Mark Sorrell, Town Council. Joy Ricciuto, Town Accountant. Matthew Violet, Assistant Town Accountant. Sarah Verposa, Town Planner. Yvonne Rumillard, Principal Assessor. Roberta Lynch, Council on Aging Director. Kevin Ryder, Park and Recreation Director. Mina Jane, Library Director. John Cogan, Veteran Service Officer.
Great. Well, we want to say hello to Representative Sean Dooley, who's here with us as well. So say hi to Sean. And we want to welcome our new director of our public library. I want to say hello to our new fire chief, Chief William Carico, and we want to thank Chief Bob Hollingshead, who has been our interim fire chief over the last 6 or 7 months and has done a fantastic job for us here in Medfield. Thank you. Thank you. Over in the corner here, we have a panel of some of Medfield's finance experts, and they will be here during the course of the evening to assist as we get into the economics and the numbers a little bit later. Georgia Kalivas, Yvonne Remillard, Matt Violet, and Joy Rasciuto. So welcome and thank you guys for being there. We'll see if we keep you busy a little bit later. So with that said, I move that the non-voting guests seated in the visitor section be permitted to sit within the town meeting and to engage with our community as requested. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on with the meeting guidelines. Our general meeting guidelines are set forth in pages 1 to 3 of the report of the warrant. So I'm going to dispense with reading the full set of the guidelines, but I will make a quick reference to a couple of key points. If you look on page 2, guideline number 9, that references the treatment of the motions, how we will treat each motion. Article 10 reminds us that the discussion and the vote is not on the article as printed in the warrant, but as on the motion that you will hear, generally either from a member of the Warrant Committee making a positive motion or from a positive motion on the floor. So remembering that we're not voting on the article, we're voting on the motions. I will only allow one motion to amend at a time. So if we have a motion to amend, we'll address that motion to amend, and if it fails, we'll go back to the original motion. Any voter who wishes to address the town meeting should go to the microphone. We have microphone number 1 and microphone number 2. There will be times when I may ask you if you have questions to go to one microphone or the other, or it could be that I would ask proponents of a position to go to one microphone and opponents to go to the other, so that we can kind of size out what the opposition and the proposition looks like. The moderator will enforce discretionary time limits on speakers. The moderator asks that the speakers not be offended if asked to complete remarks within a limited and defined time frame. So I apologize in advance to anybody. We have both the requirements of time tonight, and we have the requirements of maintaining a quorum. Number 19, the moderator has the broad discretion in the administration of the town meeting. In a minute, I'm going to tell you what my discretion yielded in terms of the order of the proceedings for the evening. Generally, I've tried to follow the following things referenced in guideline number 20 for my guidance, which is principles of fairness and prudence and expedience, considerations of the best interests of our community, and to try to stay consistent with past precedent in the administration of these town meetings. Let's talk a little bit about time. We have about 3 hours from now to finish our 46 articles. So not a lot of time if we're going to get it done tonight. If we don't get it done tonight, then we will come back tomorrow at 7:30. We would adjourn instead of dissolve the meeting at the end. I also have the opportunity to be able to declare at 10:45, if you're familiar with soccer, overage time. So we could go from 10:45 to 11:15, but only if I have a sense of certainty that we would be able to complete the town meeting in one night would we go beyond 10:45. Finally, all cell phones, portable devices, pages should be turned off and remain on silent throughout the whole meeting. In terms of the order of proceedings, so there was a handout that you may have received as you came in or may have taken off a table. The order of proceedings tonight is going to be, we're going to begin with the consent calendar, which is Articles 2, 3, 4, and 36. They're all for passage. We're then going to do the required personnel articles, articles numbers 9 and 10. Then we're going to move into town operating business articles. This is Articles 5, 6, 7, 8, 24, 25, 26, 27, 29, 30, 31, 32, and 33. We'll then address the Community Preservation Act, although I understand we do not have a positive motion, so that may be dismissed. We'll then move on to the senior housing articles, of which we have 5, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. And we'll end the first session here with the articles that relate to the Water and Sewer Board, and those are Articles 34 and number 35. We will then pause, and the remaining articles, all of the articles that have strategic financial consequence that could have implications for an override, they will be then considered by lottery. So the operating budget, Article 11, together with Article 45, which is an article to appropriate funds for that operating budget for fiscal year 19, will be considered together. Capital budgets, Article 12, to appropriate funds for the townwide master plan, Article 13, to appropriate funds for the owner's project manager and architect for a park and rec facility would be Article 14, to appropriate fund for owner's project manager and architect for an addition to the center would be Article number 15, to appropriate funds for advanced life support is Article 16, to appropriate funds for a council on former state hospital redevelopment and environmental remediation is Article 17, to appropriate funds for study of incorporating cultural uses into the former state hospital redevelopment is Article 18. The last two articles, 43 and 44, will be considered together. One is to vote to establish a municipal building stabilization fund and to appropriate funds, and linked to that is to appropriate funds and authorize borrowing for Dale Street School feasibility study. So everything after what I'm calling our standard operating business issues will be subject to a lottery. So all of the issues that have override implications or our budgets as well, we will address after we move through the first part of the meeting. I made my determinations on the order of the proceedings, bearing in mind the best manner to address all articles fairly with due consideration, and B, to provide for the highest likelihood for completing this meeting in one very focused evening, to ensure the maintenance of a quorum, and finally, to appropriately put the focus of the meeting on the financial and strategic issues which would result in an override election, which would be scheduled for June 11th. It should be noted tonight that we are not voting on overrides. So tonight we are not voting on overrides. Instead, we are voting on articles and budgets which under state law would require a later override to affirm the vote. Next, I want to reference our report on the warrant for the annual town meeting. I would like to direct your attention, if you haven't already had an opportunity to study it, to the prefatory remarks of the chairperson of the Warrant Committee on page 6, to a review of the town finances that were offered by the Board of Selectmen on page 9. The town of Medfield's tax levy is on page 13. Historical debt figures are on page 14. Comparative operating budgets are on pages 15 to 20. We will be coming back to them when we consider our operating budget, and a tax override history is on page 21. And finally, for all those of you who like to keep score as we move through these articles, there is an index of tonight's warrant articles on page 77 of the report. I would now ask Tom Marie, chairperson of the Warrant Committee, to make some brief prefatory remarks.
The warrant for the 2018 annual town meeting contains a number of articles that will determine the direction that Medfield will follow for years to come. These articles arrive with challenges, with several powerful arguments, some of our deepest beliefs about prioritization and what we should do and expect from government. As a town meeting voter, you will be asked to decide on issues dealing with school and town funding and the corresponding levels. Repairing and repainting the Mount Nebo water tower, the design of an iron and manganese removal water treatment facility, 3 capital building projects connected respectively to the Dale Street School, the center at Medfield, and a park and rec facility. You will be asked to determine to create a special stabilization fund to rehabilitate and maintain our public buildings. You will be asked to consider the extent to which the town should participate in the development of affordable senior housing. You will have the opportunity to decide if our town should begin the process of adopting the Community Preservation Act. You will decide if now is the right time for our town to update our town's master plan. you will be asked to assess the affordability and necessity of implementing the proposed Advanced Life Support Plan. The conclusion is inescapable, and viewed in the light of the foregoing choices, that democracy will prevail in the determination of the composition of how our tax dollars are spent. At the same time, Medfield is struggling to meet its long-term financial obligations to fund pensions and retiree health care, or also known as OPEB, and to pay for the large increases in health insurance. While debt levels continue to fall from a 2003 peak, the proposed capital building projects will, if approved, begin to reverse that trend. Yet, and with confidence, the debt levels will remain manageable. Beginning in 2020, considerable amounts of debt for previous school construction projects will start to come off the books, reinforcing the sound and responsible fiscal management that our town has relied on. By 2023, all the bonds for the previously listed projects will be paid off. A special thanks to the prudent and sound fiscal guidance from our town administrator, Mike Sullivan, and his staff, Georgia Kalivas, Yvonne Rebelad, Joy Rasciuto, and Matthew Violette. Historically, Medfield voters have approved numerous debt exclusion preferences, but there has not been an operating override budget on the ballot since FY12. This year, depending upon the outcome of several town meeting votes, we may be faced with a special election to consider Prop 2.5 overrides. Appropriations for these warrant articles will be contingent upon the passage of operating overrides at a special election to increase the tax levy. Our town is faced with, and has been faced with, a problem for some time. 70%, or roughly 40 million of our revenue, comes from the property tax max levy limit. While the Massachusetts economy has outperformed most of the country, this does not translate into more state aid from the Commonwealth. Our town gets approximately $8 million a year. Roughly 12% of our revenue comes from the state. Local receipts, which would consist of excise, meal tax, etc., amount to another $4.3 million. The Warrant Committee, acting as fiscal watchdogs for the 4,400 taxpayers in our town, thoroughly reviews present and future needs and resources. Given the town of Medfield has a limited revenue growth, particularly the growth of state aid and in local receipts other than the property tax revenues, this presents that dilemma. The art of budgeting and forecasting is dynamic and subject to constant change. We are sensitive to the factors that are incorporated into our deliberations and projections. We recognize that any change can materially affect what we believe to be the preferred approach. We come to the table with experiences and ideas, but our shared belief is to listen thoughtfully and research carefully. The increase in requested budgets and other spending requests is outpacing our revenue growth by a considerable amount. The Warrant Committee makes use of a practical and fact-based approach to understanding the financial implications. While tonight is a night of concept and words, we need to allow fiscal reality to intrude, and asking all present to consider that, one, if we approve a balanced budget, the tax increase, with a home assessed at the average value of $634,000, will be at 2.79%, or an additional $300 to your tax bill. And for comparative purposes, if we approve tonight and then vote for an override at the ballot, a budget which would include the revised school budget being increased to 6.16%, and all of the articles requiring monies or funding, the tax increase with that same home assessed at the average value of $635,000 will be an increase of 10.5%, or an additional $1,100 to your tax bill. Looking to the future and acknowledging the possibilities, and just to name a few, that would include embarking on building a new school, embarking on building a new park and rec facility, and making next step decisions regarding the Medfield State Hospital, along with Proposed employee additions. 6 for the school budget, 4 if the town approves the advanced life support recommendation, and 1 on the town side for an IT professional. We would need to take steps and actions that reduce financial uncertainty into quantifiable and priceable risks. Distinguishing needs and wants to establish funding priorities against the setting of numbers and values is a job worth doing and a job worth doing well. I would like to extend my deep appreciation to Barbara Gips, Mike Pastore, Joanna Hilbert, Jack Wolf, Sharon Tatro, Nick Athanasiades, Abby Marvel, and Tom Mulvoy, all of whom have worked tirelessly this past season and in the best interest of our fellow citizens. In closing, asking all to give conscientious consideration to each of the requested budget items, keeping in mind the importance of the free market and interest rate fluctuations, tax code changes, the importance of a civil society, and your individual liberties. Thank you.
And I'd ask Mike Sullivan to make some prefatory remarks.
Sure. You've got a lot of decisions to make tonight, and Tom Marie covered a lot of the things I was going to talk about, so I'll try to be brief. It's interesting. I keep hearing lately about Medfield has a structural deficit. I guess that's a polite way of saying we've been living beyond our means. And I think we have to deal with that, not just this year, but in the coming years, because I think the state has also been living beyond its means, and I don't think we can expect much aid from them. The budget you've been asked to vote on tonight is probably between $68 and $69 million. You've heard Tom say that we get about $8 million from the state. That means we have to fund about $60 to $61 million on our own resources. And the primary resource is the property tax, 70%. There are usually, when you come to town meeting, the boards have reached agreement on the major decisions, primarily the operating budget. Remember, the operating budget is over 90% of the total expenditure, so that's the big item on the agenda. This year, for whatever reason, the Warrant Committee, the School Committee, and the Board of Selectmen have not been able to reach agreement on the amount of money that should be appropriated to fund the town departmental operations. That means the ultimate decision is going to come down to the voters. Both of the town meeting members here tonight who will vote on the operating budgets, and, as has been pointed out, the override election, because none of the overrides are voted on at town meeting. The actions you take may require an override vote, but the override vote must take place at a special election. That election has been scheduled for June 11th, and it's held at the center at Medfield, where we have the normal voting. Tom pointed out a few of the facts about what we're dealing with. The overrides you are facing tonight range from a low of about $1,675,000 to a high of just under $3.5 million. There are potentially 6 articles, an operating budget override for the operating budgets, primarily the school budget. There's an ALS override to fund the provision of ALF services for our ambulance service. There's a capital override to fund initial plans for a park and rec facility. There is potentially, I understand, going to be an amendment offered or a motion offered to fund preliminary plans for an addition to the center at Medfield for the Council on Aging. There's a municipal building stabilization fund override, which I think you need to really think very carefully about, because I think it's critical to the future of the town that we maintain the buildings we have. You're going to be faced in the next couple of years with a request for $50 million plus to fund an elementary school, the replacement of the Dale Street School. And my contention is, if you don't take care of the buildings you've got, why would you trust town officials with $50 million to build a new one? So I think we have to look, and it's much cheaper in the long run to take care of the buildings that you have than to try to build a new $50 million school every 20 years, or a town hall, or a library, or a public safety building, or a town garage, or whatever. And, you know, I've heard that we can't afford all of these projects, and I agree. I think there's some that we have to determine, you have to determine what's a need and what's a want. And you have to make those decisions based on your own judgment calls. But you have to look to the future too. It's not just what you're going to spend tonight, it's what you're going to spend over the next few years. As I mentioned, we have a $50+ million school project coming down the road. We have a proposal for an addition to the, for a new FAF Center, Park and Rec building, and any of you who've been in the FAF Center know what a dump it is, frankly. And it does need something to do. When we can afford to do it is the big question. We have the Council on Aging that feels they're being squeezed in their current building and would like a new addition. We have the ALS service to maintain additional coverage for our ambulance service at a higher level of service. And the big nut to crack is the state hospital. That's coming, and you can expect to have a special town meeting in the fall to deal with the future of the state hospital. So you can say no to all these overrides tonight, but they'll be back and worse in future years. So you have to deal with some of them, and you have to, as I said, decide between a want and a need. You'll hear a lot of discussion tonight that you have to come to your own conclusions about. What happens to the tax rate? From an increase of, I think Tom pointed out, about $300 to a little over $1,000. The average, on the average property, in Medfield, the tax bill this year is $10,880, I believe. So you figure you're going to add anywhere from $300 to $1,000, $1,100 to that bill. And depending on the value of your property, you can adjust upward or downward from there. So I'll end with that. You've got a lot of tough decisions to make. I hope you think carefully about what you do. I hope you distinguish between wants and needs. I hope you look not just for what we need to spend tonight, but what we're going to be spending in the future. This is my 44th annual town meeting, and I must say, financially, it's been the toughest town meeting I've had to try to figure out what to do. And as Tom mentioned, I really appreciate the efforts of all the town officials. They've worked really hard to try to do their best. The financial team over there has found a lot of my mistakes and corrected them before they got to you people. The Warrant Committee has had countless meetings up at the new public safety building. I'm beginning to think that was their second home. They had so many meetings up there. And the department heads have all been good about coming. The Selectmen have been wrestling with these issues at length. And now it's your turn, so good luck. Thank you.
Okay, legislators ready to go? Here we go. We start with the consent calendar. Consent calendar is used for expediency, efficiency, and deliberate dispatch by acting upon certain articles as a group for reference regarding the eligibility and the procedures for the consent calendar. You can see pages 23 and 24 of the report on the warrant. I will now identify the articles to be placed on the 2018 consent calendar, and as I read the brief synopsis, if you would like further discussion on the article, please signify by saying hold. If held, the subject article will be undertaken individually. For passage, Article 2, to accept the report of town officers. Article 3, to accept cemetery perpetual care funds. Article 4, to vote revolving funds expenditure limits. And Article 36, votes to reaffirm votes to prohibit not medically prescribed marijuana establishments. I will now offer a motion that Articles 2, 3, 4, and 6 be passed as printed in the warrant. Do I have a second? Seconded. So moved. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I declare they pass unanimously. The next article is Article 9. This is one of our two personnel articles. We need to get these done at the beginning of the meeting, and they certainly need to be done before the budget, so we traditionally will take them right away. Article 9 is to fix the salary and the compensation of our elected officials. You can find it on page 28. And I would ask Warrant Committee member Mike Pastore if you have a motion.
Move that Article 9 be passed as printed out in the warrant report.
And do you have a report?
Yes. Town meeting annually votes to set the salaries of elected officials. Majority of the elected board members and town committee members receives no compensation. Each member of the Board of Assessors and the Board of Selectmen receives $900 per year. Because there is no change from last year, with the exception of a modest increase in the town clerk's salary at 1%, the Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Okay, again, nothing with the moderator? No. Okay, so are there any questions on Article 5? Any comments? If there are none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I deem that Article 9 carries unanimously. Article 10 is an article to amend the personnel administration plan and the classification of positions and pay. You can find it on page 29 of the warrant report. And Warrant Committee member Sharon Tatro, do you have a motion?
Move that Article 10 be passed as printed in the warrant report.
And do you have a report, please?
Yes. Scott gave you the beginning page number. This goes all the way to page 36, so you can feel free to flip through. I'm not going to read you all of the tables. Town employees' salaries are set by the schedules included in this warrant report. School department employees, by state statute, are excluded from the town's statutory schedule. Most police, fire, and school department employees are covered by collective bargaining contracts. Police and fire personnel salaries are included in this schedule according to the rates set out in the collective bargaining contracts. This year, the recommended general salary increase for non-union personnel is 2%. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments on Article 10? If there are none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Deem that the Article 10 carries unanimously. The next article is Article 5. Article 5, found on page 27, is an article to appropriate funds for a prior year unpaid legal bill. And I would ask, this requires 80% approval, and I would ask Warrant Committee member Tom Mulvoy for a motion.
Move that the town appropriate the sum of $12,130.75, said sum to be raised on the FY19 tax levy to pay legal bills incurred in FY17 associated with the representation of the Medfield Conservation Commission by the firm of Gordon and Reese, LLP, in connection with appeals by the developer of the proposed assisted living facility at Main Street. This is simply a case where the invoices from the firm were received after the close of the last fiscal year, so they've not yet been paid, and the Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Okay, we'll put that motion to a vote to appropriate and transfer funds for a prior year, for the unpaid prior year legal bill. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I deem it carries unanimously. Next article is Article 6. This is an article to appropriate and transfer funds for a prior year unpaid sewer department bill. You can find it on page 27 of the warrant report. Also requires an 80% vote. And Warrant Committee member Joanna Hilvert, do you have a motion?
Move that the town appropriate $725, said sum to be transferred from the Sewer Enterprise Fund surplus to pay a fiscal year 15 unpaid bill of the sewer department.
Do you have a report, please?
I do. The new Public Works Director was notified of a prior year invoice that had not been paid. This article requests funds to pay that prior year bill. It requires a 4/5 vote. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Okay, we'll put that motion to a vote. Are there any questions or comments? If there are none, we'll look for a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I deem that it carries unanimously. Article 7 is an article to appropriate funds for a prior year unpaid sealer of weights and measures bill. It can be found on page 28 of the warrant report. And Warrant Committee, Nick Athanasiadis, do you have a motion for us?
Move that the town appropriate $80.62, said sum to be raised on the FY19 tax levy to pay FY17 sealer of weights and measures bills. It requires a 4/5 vote. Because of the confusion between the fiscal and calendar year and when reimbursable expenses should be submitted for payment, the reimbursement was not submitted in time. This article requests an appropriation to reimburse those expenses. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Okay, we're going to put that motion to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? I deem that it carries unanimously. Next article is Article 8. This is an article to appropriate funds for a prior year unpaid police department medical bill, found on page 28 of the warrant report. And Warrant Committee member Nick Athanasiadis, do you have a motion?
Sure. Move that the town appropriate $497, said sum to be raised on the FY19 tax levy to pay FY17 unpaid medical bills in the amounts of $247 and $250. To the above medical bills received for services provided in connection with a work-related injury were received after the close of the fiscal year and so could not be paid. This Article 6, an appropriation to provide funds to pay these bills, requires 4/5 vote. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Thank you. I'm going to put that motion to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? We deem that it carries unanimously. Next one is Article 24. Article 24 is an article to appropriate funds raised from local meals tax to improve the economic vitality of the town. You can find it on page 56 of the warrant report. And Warrant Committee member Abby Marble, do you have a motion?
I move that the town appropriate $15,000 said sum to be raised on the fiscal year 19 tax levy to make improvements to the economic vitality of the town.
And do you have a report, please?
I do. For the past 2 years, town meeting has appropriated 10% of the local meals tax revenues to fund downtown improvement projects. This equates to approximately $15,000 of discretionary funding. To date, these funds have been used for the maintenance of Straw Hat Park, for improvements to the Dwight Derby House, and for providing assistance to the Medfield Garden Club in beautifying downtown spaces. This article also expands the range of opportunities for the use of the funds beyond downtown and enables them to be used to improve the economic vitality of the entire town instead of only the downtown area. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Okay, we're going to put Article 24 to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Excuse me. All opposed, please say no. Okay, carries. Should have said, actually, we're putting the motion to a vote, right? We're not putting the article to a vote. So we put that motion to a vote, and it carries. The next article that we are considering is Article number 25. Article 25 is an article to appropriate funds for liability insurance policy and to authorize the Selectmen to enter into a lease with the MBTA, Mass Department of Transportation, for a multi-purpose recreational trail on the abandoned rail line. You can find it at page 57 of the warrant report. We do not have a positive motion from the Warrant Committee. Do we have a positive motion from the floor? Microphone number 2.
Christian Donner, 92 Green Street. Move that the town authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a lease with the MBTA and/or Mass Department of Transportation, DOT, for the purpose of providing a route for development of a multi-purpose recreational trail, provided that the Board of Selectmen is satisfied that there are sufficient available funds from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or other sources to commence construction and/or to purchase environmental liability insurance. So I just want to emphasize the other sources here.
Okay, do we have a report from the Warrant Committee?
We do. This article, as posted in the warrant, seeks two things. First, to give the Board of Selectmen authority to enter into a lease with the MBTA or the Mass Department of Transportation for the abandoned rail trail on which a multi-purpose trail would be constructed. And two, funding for purchasing environmental liability insurance at a cost approximately $40,000 or insisting with construction financing. Since the warrant was posted, the Rail Trail Committee has dropped the funding request in connection with this article. Even without the funding request, there remain several issues with authorizing the Board of Selectmen to enter into this lease. First, the question of potential environmental liability to the town has not, at this point, been fully vetted by the town. Second, the proposed trail is 1.3 miles and will not connect to trails in any other town or anywhere else in Medfield. Third, the trail would cross two busy streets, Farm Street and Harding Street. And finally, if the committee is unable to attain funding and/or grant monies, the town may be obligated financially in the future, capping the railroad trail bed if the project is started but does not proceed, improving road crossings and ongoing maintenance, and perhaps from the DPW. Due to the current inability to quantify the potential long-term cost to the town and with an eye towards the risk versus reward calculation with respect to this article, the Warrant Committee recommends dismissal.
Are there any comments on this article? Mr. Peterson.
The Board of Selectmen voted in favor of this article, specifically, I think, because we like the idea of getting a rail trail in town, and also because there was no town money attached to it. I think that even if Dover doesn't connect us to the rest of the world on this, we still get a little section that will improve the town. So we voted 3-0 in favor of this article.
Microphone number 2.
Dick Judge, 8 Juniper. There are very few things a town can do to increase their value as a town, and recommend getting athletic parks and so forth for virtually nothing. This is an opportunity for the town to connect an emerald necklace around the town, going from one part of the town in toward the state hospital, following most of the Bay State Trail. This is an opportunity that other towns around us have taken. We are doing it on the cheap. We are doing it with mostly donated time and effort from the people of the town of Medfield. So my feeling is that a vote in affirmative would put us in the right direction to increase our recreation space in town for a minimal cost. Thank you.
1.
I'm just concerned about what these costs are going to be, because nothing's truly defined. It's based on some grants that are not, we don't know exactly how much is going to come through. We don't know when they're going to come through. So the funding, I think, is not as clear. And I think the town's responsibility may be more than we think it's going to be, not only to bring it to the town, but also to maintain it and to maintain safety, safety around the trail. The other piece that I'm concerned about is I would like, I'm in a butter, and I would like more information. I know I've talked to various people, but I still feel like I have a lot of questions, that things weren't specific enough about what they're going to use as fencing and blocking so that my property is somewhat protected. I don't think there's enough specifics for my vote, and I would like other people to get more specific information before they vote yes on this.
Okay. Thank you. Microphone number 2, final comment.
Christian Donner, 92 Green Street. I just want to address a couple of points that in the Warrant Committee's concerns, specifically the liability insurance and the funding question. And the liability insurance is a technicality that is required by the language in the MBTA lease. It's not really mandated because we see that there's a lot of risk from environmental contamination in the corridor, but by purchasing that policy, you get a different lease basically that is much better than if you don't have the policy. The cost of the lease, we recently got a quote just in a few days. It's $37,000 for 5 years, and that is part of the numbers that I put together that were on a flyer that I distributed outside. So that would also be covered through our fundraising effort and not tax money from the town. The other question about funding in general, also I refer to the flyer that I distributed. So we have a study done last year in 2016 into 2017. There was a design study done from a professional engineering firm, paid for through donations and raised by the Bay Colony Rail Trail Association and then granted to the town of Medfield. So we have this study. It's very detailed. It has very, very detailed cost estimates. It's all there. It's all available on the website, medfield.baycolonyrailtrail.org. Specifically, we estimate for phase 1 that would include a stone dust capped trail, so there's no exposure. You can leave it that way for years. If we cannot raise the remainder of the money to really finish the project, we can leave it in that state. There's no danger. It's not exposed. There's no liability or risk. It's $320,000 roughly for the first phase, and we have a $100,000 grant pending. The application was submitted in February for a DCR grant through the Recreational Trails Program, and there's a good chance that we get that, and we can get a smaller amount or even the same amount next year if we apply again. So I think it's doable that the Friends of the Medfield Rail Trail Committee can raise the $320,000 to complete phase 1. Now, is there risk? Here's what we do to take the risk out of this. We don't sign the lease with the MBTA until we have the money, and we have about 2 years to do that because the grant has like a 2-year period until it needs to be spent. So grants are awarded in October, and from that point on, we have 2 years to spend the money. So in those 2 years, we need to raise $300,000, sign the lease, start construction, and we wouldn't ask the selectmen to do that until we have the money. So that's all.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to put this motion to a vote. The positive motion came from Mr. Donner and from the floor. It was moved that the town authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a lease with the MBTA or the Mass Department of Transportation for the purposes of providing a route for development of a multi-purpose recreational trail, provided that the Board of Selectmen is satisfied that there are sufficient available funds from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or other sources to commence construction and or to purchase environmental liability insurance. So a vote in favor would be a vote in favor of the motion made from the floor. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. If I could have a show of hands. So if you're in favor, please raise your hands. And if you're opposed, I'm going to deem that the motion carries. The next motion is a motion to appropriate Article 26, to appropriate funds and authorize selectmen to apply for grants, loans for a traffic safety improvement study at the intersection of North Meadows Road, Route 27, and West Street. And we do not have a positive motion from the Warrant Committee. Do I have a positive motion from the floor? If not, this article would be dismissed. So we will dismiss Article number 26. Good. Article number 27. Article number 27 is an article to appropriate funds for the town's share of a pre-disaster mitigation plan update. You can find information at the article at page 58 of the warrant report. And Warrant Committee member Mike Pastore, do you have a motion?
Move that the town appropriate $4,875, said sum to be raised in the FY19 tax levy, to provide the town's matching share, $4,875, of the cost of preparing an update to the town's pre-disaster mitigation plan, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to apply for and receive federal, state, and/or private grants and/or loans to accomplish the same.
Okay, do you have a report, please?
Sure do. This article funds the match to a federal grant for the update to the town's pre-disaster mitigation plan, which was last updated in 2011. The plan needs to be updated periodically, which is why the Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Are there any questions and comments on this article? If there are not, we'll put it to vote. All in favor of appropriating fund for the town share of the pre-disaster mitigation plan and update, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I'm going to deem that it passes. Next article is Article number 29. Article 29 authorizes the selectmen to accept a sidewalk easement at South and Metacomet Streets. The article's on page 58 of the warrant report. And do we have a motion from Warrant Committee member Nick Athanasiadis?
We'll move that the Article 29 be passed as printed on the warrant report.
And do you have a report?
Yes. To construct a sidewalk at Metacomet Street from Pleasant Street to South Street, it is necessary to obtain a small sidewalk easement from the landowner on the southerly side of Metacomet Street at the South Street end. The landowner has agreed to convey this easement. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Any questions or comments on this article? If not, we'll put it to a vote to authorize selectmen to accept the sidewalk easement at South Street and Metacomet Roads. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I deem that it carries. Article 30. Article 30 is an article to authorize the selectmen to enter into an agreement to relocate and reconfigure a town-owned water easement on private land off Harding Street. It can be found on page 59 of the warrant report. And do we have a motion from Warrant Committee member Mike Pastore?
Move that Article 30 be passed as printed in the warrant report, except that the phrase, quote, provided that any agreement and/or documents be subject to review and approval by the Water and Sewerage Board, end quote, after the phrase, quote, to implement said agreement, end quote, be added.
Do you have a report?
This article allows the town to retain a 15-foot easement on the property and to choose the new location for the easement. It is noted that this article authorizes but does not direct the Board of Selectmen to enter into this agreement. Any agreement is going to be subject to the review and approval of the Water and Sewerage Board. Based on the apparent benefit to the town and the built-in levels of approval, the Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Are there any questions or comments on Article 30? If there are none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I'll deem that the Article 30 carries. That's a 2/3? Okay, so I'm going to declare, again, if we can put that to a vote, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I'll deem that it passes unanimously. Article number 31 is an article to transfer the sewer betterments paid in advance for sewer stabilization fund, found on page 59 of the warrant. And Warrant Committee member Joanna Hilbert, do you have a motion?
Move that the town transfer $106,235.54 from the sewer betterments paid in advance to the sewer stabilization fund. Sewer betterments are assessed to property owners when sewers are extended to their properties. They can be paid off all at once or apportioned over a period of years. Property owners may choose an early payoff of this assessment, usually done when a property is sold or refinanced. The money from these early payoffs is set aside and appropriated to a sewer betterment stabilization fund, which is used to spread out the use of these funds over the remaining life of the bonds issued to pay for the work. The request under this Article 31 is to effectuate transferring such early payoff funds into the sewer betterment stabilization fund. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Do we have any questions, comments on Article 31? If there are none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? We'll deem that it carries. Next article is Article number 32. Article number 32 is an article to transfer the balance of an ambulance purchase loan from ambulance revolving fund to the general fund stabilization fund. Article can be found on page 60 of the warrant report. And do we have a motion from Warrant Committee member Nick Athanasiadis?
Yes. Move that the town transfers $20,000 from the ambulance revolving fund to the general fund stabilization fund, which amount is for the final reimbursement to the stabilization fund for a loan to purchase a town ambulance. 2 years ago, the fire department purchased a new ambulance. The town meeting appropriated $285,000, of which $215,000 was transferred from the ambulance revolving fund, and $7,000 was transferred from the general fund stabilization fund. This latter amount was to be repaid to the stabilization fund as revenues in the ambulance revolving fund permitted. Last year, $50,000 was put back in the stabilization fund. This article will put this remaining $20,000 back in the stabilization fund. Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments relative to Article 33? If there are none, we'll put that to a vote. All in favor? 32. Got ahead of myself. 32. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, deem that it carries. Now on to Article 33. Article 33 is an article to appropriate funds to the Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust, known as OPEB. It can be found on page 60. And Warrant Committee Chairperson Tom Marie, do you have a motion?
Move that the town appropriate $400,000 and to meet said appropriation, $113,629 be raised on the FY19 tax levy, $44,434 be transferred from the FY18 county retirement contribution budget, account number 01911-2, $16,050 be transferred from the water enterprise free cash, $25,887 be transferred from the sewer enterprise free cash, and $200,000 be transferred from the general fund free cash to make an annual contribution to other post-employment benefits, OPEB, that trust fund.
Do you have a report?
I do. The FY19 request for this article is $400,000. Please note that per the latest actuarial valuation report provided by Stone Consulting, our town's unfunded liability for OPEB, which is retiree medical insurance, as of January 1, 2017, is $39,772,000. The current balance as of December 31st, 2017, in this trust fund is $2,847,605. At present, those eligible for coverage, and this includes retirees, beneficiaries, and survivors, is at 379. With GASB 75 coming into effect next year, we know that the quote-unquote rules of the game will change. We also know that our town will have the obligation to recognize a significant shortfall in our balance sheet. Therefore, and as we prepare for the full implementation, impact, and corresponding financial obligations, the contribution level of $400,000 is the right amount and in continuation of what we've been doing for the past several years. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Are there questions or comments on OPEB, on Article 33? If there are none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And I'll rule that the motion carries. Okay, so if you're following the order of proceedings, we've just finished the town operating business articles. We're moving on to the articles that deal with amendment to bylaws. The first one is Article number 28. Article 28 is an amend bylaws by amending Chapter 170 on licenses and permits. Section 170.1 can be found on page 59 of the warrant report. And we have a motion from Warrant Committee member Nick Athanasiadis.
Move that the town amend the code of the Town of Medfield Bylaws, Chapter 170, Licenses and Permits, Section 170.1, by deleting in the third line the words "shall annually" and replacing it with the phrase "may periodically." Okay, this article will permit the treasurer collector to review applications for licenses and permits as requests are received. At present, the SEC can only contact a review once a year. This would help the treasurer collector in making sure outstanding amounts owed to the town are collected. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Do we have any questions or comments on Article 28? If there are none, we will vote on Article 28. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Deemed that it carries. We now move to Article number 37. Article 37 is to amend the bylaws to define the composition and duties of the Permanent Planning and Building Committee. You can find the article on page 62 of the warrant report. And Warrant Committee member Barbara Gibbs, do you have a motion?
Move that Article 37 be passed as printed in the warrant.
And do you have a report, please?
I do. The Permanent Building Committee has been an ad hoc committee which has been relatively undefined in terms of composition, role, and charter. The town has invested and will continue to invest significant monies in capital facilities project. The committee feels that it is necessary to, one, guarantee that leadership in this effort should be written into the bylaws to make the committee's existence more permanent. Two, to begin to define the role of the committee to for departments seeking capital project funds. And three, provide oversight and direction to the Director of Facilities as he consolidates responsibility from what used to be disparate budgets and staffing. The committee does not endorse or deny building projects such as Dale Street, the Council on Aging, or Park and Rec. Once projects are approved by the town, the committee will work with the departments focusing on 3 phases. Feasibility study, which includes site options, design, and the project itself. The Warrant Committee recommends passage of this article.
The questions and comments regarding Article 37? If there are none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I'll deem that the motion carries. Next one is Article 38. This is an article to amend the bylaws, Chapter 100 on animals, Article 2 on dog control. The article can be found on page 65 of the warrant report, and we have a motion from Warrant Committee member Joanna Hilvert.
Move that Article 38 be passed as printed in the warrant.
Do you have a report, please?
Yes. This article amends the code of the Town of Medfield, updating Section 100, Animals, Article 2, Dog Control, to more clearly define certain behavior which is already prohibited and add confinement and muzzling as intermediate enforcement options. This article does not change existing dog leash requirements, pest waste provisions, or fine amounts. The Warrant Committee believes that this update to the dog control law will provide clarity to the current requirements and add tools to the enforcement toolbox, but will not substantively change the impact of the existing statute. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Are there any questions or comments on this article? If there are not, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Deem that the motion carries. Next article to address is Article number 39. This is an article to amend town bylaws to authorize the Water and Sewerage Board to adopt regulations and enforcement procedures. The article can be found on page 67. And Warrant Committee member Joanna Hilvert, do you have a motion, please?
Move that Article 39 be passed as printed in the warrant.
And a report?
This article amends the code of the Town of Medfield, Chapter 270, Water Article 2, Public Water Supply System, to give the Water and Sewerage Board the authority to promulgate regulations and establishes penalties for violations of those regulations. Pursuant to the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 69B, the Medfield Board of Water and Sewerage has exclusive charge and control of the water department and water system in the town of Medfield. This article gives the board the authority to promulgate lawful regulations pursuant to said authority. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Are there any questions or comments on Article 39? If there are none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I deem that the motion carries. Article 40. Article 40 is an amendment to the zoning bylaws to allow the granting of waivers for landscaping requirements in certain zoning districts. The warrant article is on page 69 of the warrant report, and this requires a 2/3 vote as an amendment to the zoning bylaws. And Warrant Committee member Tom Mulvoy, do you have a motion?
Move that the article be passed as printed in the warrant.
Would you report, please?
Yes. Beg your pardon? Current regulations call for a landscape buffer strip along each boundary that adjoins a residential lot and specifies such matters as the minimum width for the strip, the height and the width of a screen of plantings, types of trees, they must be evergreen, and the like. This article would allow the planning board to give waivers at its discretion on landscape buffer requirements. The Warrant Committee recommends that Article 40 be passed as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Do we have a report from the planning board?
We do. Pursuant to provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 5, as amended by the Medfield Planning Board, we held a public hearing on January 2018 to consider amending the zoning bylaws set out in Article 40. Public hearing was duly posted and advertised in the Medfield Press on the 22nd and 29th of December. This proposed amendment allows the planning board to use their discretion during the public hearing process to modify plant location and spacing for better plant viability, resulting in enhanced buffering of new construction. The planning board is not allowed to reduce the required number of plantings. The planning board voted unanimously for the passage of Article 40.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? Any questions for the planning board? If there are none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I'll deem that it passes by the required 2/3 vote. Thank you very much. Article 41 is also an amendment to the zoning bylaws to create a new special permit criteria for multifamily dwelling developments. The article can be found on page 69 of the warrant report. Sponsor was the planning board, and it again requires a 2/3 vote. And again, we have a positive motion from Warrant Committee member Tom Mulvoy.
Move that Article 41 be passed as printed in the warrant. This article would amend the code of the town of Medfield, Chapter 300 zoning, by establishing new special permit criteria for multifamily developments as listed in the wording of the article. The Warrant Committee recommends that Article 41 be passed as printed in the warrant.
We'll get a report again from the planning board.
Article 41 to add new special permit requirements specific to multifamily developments. This article again had the same notice requirements as Article 40. This article supplements the series of new RU zoning articles that were approved at last year's annual town meeting. The planning board proposed special permit criteria for two-family dwellings, but we did not have enough time to develop the specific special permit criteria for multifamily developments. This provision, which consists of the new Section G, requires developers proposing multifamily developments to propose a plan which respects the qualities of the existing neighborhood in terms of scale, massing, and general character. Sections titled H and I are existing and simply renumbered to accommodate new Section G. Again, the planning board voted unanimously for passage of Article 41.
Okay, well, thank you. Microphone number 1, please.
Nathan Bazinet, 30 Oriole Road. I'd like to make a motion to against this article. From what I've read in the documents, basically what I'm seeing is that this will apply to all of the districts. I didn't see anything about the RU district specifically. It also strikes me that there's no possibility to put a two-family house in the RT or RE districts, but now we're going to be allowing multifamilies in those areas. Additionally, last year's inclusionary zoning bylaw that was passed allows 6+ units dwellings to increase on a plot. That tells me if you can combine this article with that one, you might be able to put 6 units next door to me. I know it's discretion oriented, but everybody's from a different part of town. Maybe you don't know what my part of town's like. Something that came up in the Selectmen meeting was the pedestrian-friendly areas, something like that. It's especially going to apply to my neighborhood where we have sidewalks on both sides of the street. There's no sidewalks on a lot of streets in town, so I guess necessarily going to be funneled into areas with 2 sidewalks. I'd make a motion to not pass Article 41. Thank you.
Okay, just to be clear, you don't need to make a motion to not pass. You need to, when we have the vote, to urge your fellow neighbors to vote against it. But do you want to answer those questions from the...
This is pertaining just to the RU district. Again, it's in relation to last year's special permit that we got out the 2/3 vote. Again, this is just strictly for the RU district.
Okay. Town Council Mark Sorrell.
This does not define where multifamily housing is permitted. That is defined in a separate table of uses. This is just the criteria that are to be applied by the planning board in determining whether to allow a specific project.
Any other questions or comments? From microphone number 1, please.
Tom Sweeney, 61 North Street. I have a 2-family house in the business and business industrial. I haven't got 25 feet on either side of frontage. That leaves me in a quandary. That means I've got to get a special permit to do anything. Would somebody try to answer that one?
That would be zoning enforcement, but I believe, Mr. Sweeney, you'd be grandfathered in.
You sure or not?
Yep. That's interpretation of the zoning enforcement officer.
I've heard a lot about grandfather, but
Yeah.
I'm a grandfather, but I don't think it'll get... Thanks.
Other questions or comments? If not, we'll go back to the motion. The motion was to amend the zoning bylaws to create the new special permit criteria for multifamily dwelling. It requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I'm going to deem that it carries by the required 2/3 vote. Thank you. Next article is Article number 42. That, by the way, that completes our run through the articles associated with amending our bylaws. The next one is Article 42. It's a vote to authorize the election to accept the Massachusetts Community Preservation Act. You can find it on page 72 of your warrant report. And we do not have a positive motion from the Warrant Committee. Do we have a positive motion from the floor? If we don't, we will dismiss Article 42. The next 5 articles, Articles 19 through 23, are senior housing articles. I'd ask Tony Santori from the Senior Housing Study Committee to approach microphone number 1 or 2. How are you, Tony? Can I just get clear on the treatment of this? So we have 5 articles, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. I understand that we will not have a positive motion on numbers 19, 21, and 22. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're going to dismiss Articles 19, 21, and 22. And I would then ask Warrant Committee member Tom Mulvoy if you have a positive motion on Article 20.
Move that the Board of Selectmen consider the development of affordable senior housing on Lot 3, Ice House Road.
And do you have a report, please?
Yes, the Warrant Committee had recommended dismissal of the article as posted in the warrant, but the new wording tonight, the new wording, with the new wording, the Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Santori, why don't you take this moment to talk a little bit about senior housing?
The articles that I submitted were prepared in early December, and without having counsel, I tried to put together a bunch of articles that would cover all the bases for the development of 2 parcels on Ice House Road, Lot 3 and Lot 1, the Hinckley property. I realized that some of these warrant articles that I proposed are illegal, conflict with different laws, But I have found in past years that if somebody tried to dissuade me from putting it in an article, I agreed, and nothing happened. So this year I decided to put in 5 bullets in my gun and fire them off and see how many hit the target. I will say that the town, the Affordable Housing Trust, and the Board of Selectmen has moved positively on the Hinckley property. This amendment on Article 20 would focus on Lot 3, which has been fallow for many years. We thought there was going to be some development on Lot 3 for a sports facility or senior apartments. I think the purpose of this thing here is to bring Lot 3 back into focus and to recommend that the selectmen consider senior housing or apartments or something on Lot 3.
Okay, well, thank you. We're going to put this motion, Article 20, to a vote if there's no other comments or questions. Article 20 to move that the Board of Selectmen, yes, consider the development of affordable senior housing in Lot 3 on Ice House Road. Mr. Murby.
I think I'm the one that needs to respond to that article because I think I'm the one that's blocked Lot 3 from being senior housing. My reason for doing that is because Lot 3 is one of the few pieces of commercial property we have in this town. If we want to get out in front of our taxes and if we want to diversify our tax base, something we should not do is start converting commercially available property over to residential use when we have other places that we can put it. Having said that, I would absolutely consider all uses of the property at the point in time that I think it's appropriate for us to do that. I've been advocating for commercial development on lot number 3 for several years. That conversation has gotten balled up in a very confusing and totally counterproductive discussion in my mind at the Board of Selectmen level. So a few months ago, I basically decided that was not something we were going to sort out. And I basically said, let's take that off the table for now. So in terms of being willing to consider senior housing on Lot 3, I absolutely would consider it. But my priority for Lot 3 would be commercial development. And for that matter, I think it would be wise for us to wait until we've seen the results of the senior housing survey before we actually determine where we're going to put senior housing to make sure it reflects where people would like it. But I'm the guy.
Okay, microphone number 1, please.
Yes, Bradford Garnett, 123 Granite Street. As I remember, and I understand Lot 1 and Lot 3, Lot 3 we had already voted on in a previous town hall as Selectman Murby had spoken about as being commercial. I see a blob of Medfield residents traveling, including my sister and her children, to Four Kicks every Saturday and Sunday to play sports. I had moved to California, I've come back, I was told that there was going to be a Four Kicks that the townspeople had voted on, and yet I don't see it. Now we're discussing senior housing on Lot 1 and Lot 3, when Lot 3 had already been appropriated as far as I can remember, as being a facility in which we're going to build a facility that will generate revenue for our town, and yet we all see that property taxes are the main revenue source for our town, yet we're talking about adding more housing when we're in desperate need of having somewhat of a balance. So I'm trying to get some clarification as one, how is this even on as Lot 3? We already voted for it. And then from there on, if we're already discussing the Hinckley and that's already been put on, coupled with the fact that we've already voted to have this sports facility, I don't even understand why this amendment is on and being talked about. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Mr. Sweeney?
Yeah, Lot 3, very interesting. That land, Hinckley's, that was my grandfather's land. But that land is ideal for senior housing. That's also commercial, if anybody wants to know. You're gonna get taxes out of that. I don't know where you get, they're not gonna get any taxes. Seniors pay taxes. And it's about this town starts to understand that. There's no free ride for seniors. And that's one of the problems we have, because we have to pay taxes. So I think when you think of this thing, just don't think it that way. I've been in this town since 1938, and there's some other people who have been here longer. And believe me, there's no break at all.
Okay, thank you. Last comment?
Excuse me, forgive me, I'm not trying to be negative towards or look down on older individuals or seniors. My mother's here. I'm not going to tell you her age, but she's not a millennial. That being said, all I'm saying is as if, and we talk about the state hospital, 160 acres, Lot 3, sports facility, Kingsbury Club that has already been built there, sort of makes sense there. And then why not have the opportunity to build double the amount of senior housing? Because I would like my mother and father to be able to stay here. That's just my thought.
Good. Okay, Mr. Sorrell, final comments?
Yeah, to your point, Lot 3 was put under the control of the Selectmen for the purpose of ground leasing to a private developer. It didn't specify for what. What you talked about is one possibility. All this is an advisory motion or request that the Selectmen also consider some other alternate uses. So it's not binding. The Selectmen already do have control of the property and can ground lease it if they find a developer or a proposal that they find in the town's interest. There's a state process that you have to go through. You can't just unilaterally deal with a developer.
I'm going to move that the Board of Selectmen consider the development of affordable senior housing in Lot 3, Ice House Road. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we're going to have a show of hands. So all in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. All opposed? I'm going to deem that it does not carry. Next article is Article 23. Article 23 is a petition to instruct the Hospital Planning Committee to incorporate more affordable ownership rental senior housing into the redevelopment plan. You can find this article on page 56 of the warrant report. Again, it is a citizen petition, but we do have a positive motion from Tom Mulvoy, Warrant Committee member.
Move that the Board of Selectmen instruct the Medfield State Hospital Planning Committee to incorporate more appropriate and affordable senior 65-plus housing featuring ranch-type condominiums apartments with price points between $350,000 to $500,000 and apartment rental not to exceed $2,000 a month. The Warrant Committee recommends passage as printed in the warrant.
Thank you. Comments, questions regarding Article 33? Excuse me, 23. I already crossed it out. Please.
Thank you. I'm just curious if there was any science behind these numbers. I just filled out a survey that's probably in transit in the mail. So this information that's up here, senior 65 plus, why is it 65 plus? Ranch type condominiums, sure, one-story facilities are probably a good idea, but does it need to be a ranch type? Why the price points between $350,000 and $500,000? Is that something that was determined by a deliberate review by experts who are looking at what the optimum range should be? And the same thing for the $2,000 per month. I mean, it looks like a great idea, but it seems to me those numbers come out of thin air, and we should wait for the survey to come back and people to review that in a sober fashion before we make any decisions on these numbers.
Okay, Mr. Centauri?
Mr. Centauri, 27 Longmeadow Road, and I was chairman of the Senior Housing Study Committee. All of these facts were determined based on a survey we conducted of Medfield seniors. We had over 250 individuals who gave us their comments. These were the price ranges that people wanted. The reason we had 65, I think, is because most people realize that if you're 55 to 65, you're probably still working and you can get a loan to buy any house you want in Medfield. But if you're 65 and older, you're on Social Security and a 401k, you can't get a mortgage. That's where these numbers come from. It was a survey that was done. The rent is an average of apartment renting in Medfield. So there's a lot of background that went into this article. It wasn't pulled out of the air. We did a lot of work on our committee, and I'm proud to say we had a survey that cost zero. And the current survey that you see floating around, I think, has cost something like $10,000, and you're probably going to see the same results come out.
Microphone number 2.
Ken Richard, 51 Country Way. As a former member of the State Hospital Redevelopment Committee, and I look at this warrant, and my biggest complaint is through lots of good effort, lots of good intention, we've had zero results and no progress on the state hospital land. Now I'm looking at a warrant book where now we have our 4th citizen petition, and we're essentially picking at the carcass of this animal that we bought. And I think through lack of action, we're going to get all these other proposals to do it in a piecemeal basis. And I don't know whether tonight's a night where the State Hospital Redevelopment Committee is going to come forward and tell us, where the heck we stand on this hot piece of land. But until, I can't believe we would vote on anything on a piecemeal basis while we're anxiously awaiting a full report from our State Hospital Committee. So in that regard, any of these one-off suggestions with regard to what we might do, I'd be strongly against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Greg Sullivan, 122 Green Street. I just want a clarification. Those are pretty hard numbers, and I'm just wondering, are those numbers show perpetuity, knowing that it could be a number of years before that 65 housing gets built? So those seemed awful hard and static numbers given where we are today.
Comments? Anybody from up here? No? Other questions or comments? Okay. Sure, please.
Only because nobody else jumped on this, I'd like to respond to a couple things. First, I agree with the comments about the piecemeal decisions around the state hospital. I don't think we'd want to do that. I do want to respond in a little different way to the senior survey. There is a senior survey out. We're getting a tremendous response back in. We expect that survey is going to build on what Tony's committee did. So this is not asking the question looking for a different answer. It is asking the question looking for some more specific answers. The question around the pricing, I think, we took Tony's survey and used that basic format. It made some sense if you looked at the average cost of housing here in town, that if seniors were going to sell a house, we wanted pricing that was below it. So if you want the thinking behind it, that's where that came through. The survey, we hope, will give us the kind of insight that will help the town give seniors an option to be able to buy housing or to rent housing that gives them a fair chance economically to be here. So this is not meeting some hard and fast requirement. It's trying to come up with a solution to a group of people who have identified that they'd like to stay in town, but economically it's difficult to do that. So the spirit of this isn't like trying to nail down a specification. It's not intended to give a windfall to anybody so they can buy something cheaply now and sell it at a higher price later on. It's really trying to respond to a need in the best way that we can, given that we have some resources, especially with regard to land, to do that. So it's not quite as contentious as it felt a little bit to me there in those comments.
Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, I'm going to ask the motion to be reread.
Mary Harney, 17 Maplewood Road. I just want to comment again about the $350,000 house range. I just heard a story about a young couple who wanted to put a breezeway on their house, between the house and the garage. $85,000 for a breezeway. How are you going to build a house for $350,000?
Warrant Committee Member Barbara Gibbs.
I just had another comment to talk about the senior housing study that hopefully all of you got who have somebody over 55 in your household. We use the census data from town, and we mailed that to 2,204 households in town. So as of today, it just went out last Monday, and as of today, we already had 250 responses. So keep your responses coming. I just wanted to give you a scale of how many senior housing over 55 that we actually have in town, which is 2,204.
Okay, Mr. Mulvoy, could you read the motion, please?
Yes. Move that the Board of Selectmen instruct the Medfield State Hospital Planning Committee to incorporate an affordable senior 65-plus housing featuring ranch-type condominiums, apartments, with price points between $350,000 to $500,000, and apartment rental not to exceed $2,000 per month.
Okay, let's put that motion to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, I'm going to deem that the motion is defeated. That completes on our order of proceedings the provisions on senior housing. We move to Article number 34. Article 34 is an article to appropriate funds from the Water Enterprise Fund for the iron manganese removal from our water supply. You can find the article on page 61. It was sponsored by the Water and Sewerage Board, and Warrant Committee member Joanna Hilvert has a motion.
Move that the town appropriate $660,000, said sum to be transferred from the Water Enterprise free cash, to continue to study the most effective method to remove iron and manganese deposits from the town's water supply, and to design the appropriate facility to accomplish this. Medfield's water is predominantly supplied by wells number 6 and number 3, with number 6 supplying approximately 50% of Medfield's water and well number 3 supplying approximately 25%. Well number 3 and well number 4 are impacted by higher than ordinary iron and manganese levels. While these levels meet current DEP standards, they cause discoloration of the water and other undesirable results. The town currently treats this problem by blending the water from all of the wells so as to dilute the concentrations of iron and manganese in wells number 3 and number 4. Due to the iron and manganese problem, due to Medfield's growing population and in anticipation of future growth, the Board of Water and Sewerage has recommended that the town seek additional sources of water supply. In addition, best practices would require a duplicative water source to back up well number 6 in the event that well number 6 experiences a shutdown. To this end, last year, the town funded a study to search for potential locations of additional wells in Medfield. Although a sufficient new water source was not identified, the search revealed that well number 3 has sufficient capacity to provide the necessary additional water volume to the town, but currently the excess levels of iron and manganese are preventing it from being a fully productive well. Therefore, the Board of Water and Sewerage, in consultation with DEP, is looking into solutions for the iron and manganese problem at wells 3 and 4. Article 34 requests that $660,000 be transferred from the Sewer Enterprise Fund to be used to fund the preliminary and final design of an iron and manganese treatment plant for these wells, the construction of which is currently projected to cost approximately $8 to $9 million. In addition, it is noted that the Board of Water and Sewerage would expect that town water rates would go up over the next few years as a result of this project. Recognizing the high cost of this project, the Board of Water and Sewerage has indicated that it will continue to research whether there are other options which meet the water demands of the town with a lower burden on residents. In the event the Board of Water and Sewerage determines that it is prudent for the town to go forward with the treatment facility, it would expect to request approval for the construction of said facility at a future town meeting. Timing of this request will largely depend on the results of the design study to be funded under this Article 34, as well as the availability of state funds to offset the cost of the treatment plant. The Warrant Committee agrees with the Board of Water and Sewerage that it is prudent, given the town's obligation to provide an adequate supply of water to its residents, to take the actions necessary to ensure that wells 3 and 4 become sufficiently productive wells for the town of Medfield, while at the same time taking steps to ensure that the selected option makes financial sense for the town. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize Bill Harvey from the Board of Water and Sewer. If you would, at microphone number 1.
Thank you. So this project has been on our master plan for the better part of 7 years. A couple of other projects got in the way, namely the replacement of the water tank that was at Hospital Hill. So this project is to address 2 of the wells that are sort of underperforming both in quantity as well as in quality. Last year, we began the study to see what it would take to treat these wells as well as expand their capacity. Once we saw the initial numbers come in from our consulting company, we decided it was prudent to both support our master plan for water resources as well as try to find another option. Essentially, we looked through 16 different parcels of land that the town owns or has water rights to. And we went on a drilling program to drill holes in the ground to go look for better water to essentially avoid an expensive water treatment plant. What we found is that we found a gusher of water. However, it still had elevated levels of iron and manganese. So this article is to fund two things. The first is to continue the study. As part of that is to analyze the results of a pilot program which is being conducted in the next couple of weeks of trialing of trying several different technologies to minimize the cost, to bring the cost down by some large factor. The other part of the study is to help us navigate a funding path through the use of the state, through a federal program that's managed by the state for basically a 2% loan instead of the prevailing 5 to 5.5% loan for these large municipal projects. So that is the first part of this appropriation. The second part is that we have no choice but to develop well number 3, we're calling it 3A, and also develop it at a large capacity, that the second part of this appropriation is to set aside funds to do the detailed engineering, the design, the permitting, and the development of that well, and then prepare bid documents and get bids from a contractor, and then at the next town meeting or the meeting afterwards, depending upon when the funds are available from the state, and then we'll have a project to vote on at that point in time.
Further questions and comments regarding Article 34? Approach microphone number 1, please.
Good evening, Medfield. Tom Cragliano. Let me FYI. Back in the mid-'60s, I had forehand information. The water in this town coming from our wells was cleaner than the bottled water that you buy today. That's right. We couldn't get a pH. That's how clean it was. The specific ohms resistance was 400,000. There was only 18 to 22 parts per million of sodium. The cardiologists loved it. What has happened to our water? Where'd it go? Bill is working very hard in that committee, and I've been attending some of these meetings. I think our goal should be, give us water going forward that we don't have to have a chlorination involvement, and we don't have to buy bottled water anymore. Why? We've got to get rid of those bottles. We expense that. Let's get back to that clean water again. We don't know what's going to happen there. We also have well water in the town. Some of the people go down 80 feet, 800 feet. And that water's pretty good. I was on a Board of Health when we did Title V, and we also put down that any water that you have from a well must have drinking water quality. The state doesn't have that specification. However, I'm concerned what's going forward here, and I think we can come up with a good plan going forward to give you water that will be an asset to the town, we'll be proud of, and the people will say, wow, we're going back to where you were back in the 60s when we had this ultra clean water. I think we can do it, and that should be our goal. And thank you, Bill. Thank you for the committee. Thank you, Maurice, and the others here in town. So
Tom, I think everybody's in favor of clean water. Are you in favor of this motion or just interested?
No, I see the
Favor?
motion to look into it, but until I see all these engineering reports, which I haven't seen, we have a lot of questions pertaining to just those two particular specifics, the manganese and the iron. But there are many, many other things that we should be looking at, and I haven't seen that report with hard copy. And I'm well-versed on all the water analysis going forward. The Lawrence Experiment Station did it way back when, and then the EPA was promulgated in 70, and in 76 they did it. And I can speak for many, many of the analysis going forward in the SWA 46, which is this.
Okay, thank you.
Is available to us. So thank you. Thank you, Bill.
We'll put this motion to a
Let's
vote.
go. No chlorine in our water. Let's get it clean again.
Good. All in favor of clean water? Good. So let's put this to a vote, this motion to a vote. Article 34 is the motion to appropriate funds for the Water Enterprise Fund for the manganese removal from our water supply. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Deemed that the motion carries. The next article is also from the Water and Sewerage Board. It's article number 35. It's to appropriate funds and authorize borrowing to paint and repair Mount Nebo's water tower. And we have on page 61 is the article, and we have a positive motion from the Warrant Committee from Warrant Committee member Joanna Hilbert.
Move that the town appropriate $1,100,000 and that to meet said appropriation, $250,000 be transferred from the unexpended balance of funds in the State Hospital Water Tower and Mains account 434109-590002, and that the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $850,000 under and pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, or any other enabling legislation to make repairs to and to repaint the interior and/or exterior of the Mount Nebo Water Tower, and to purchase and install circulating equipment in this water tower to maintain the appropriate water quality levels. In 1983, 35 years ago, the town completed the construction of the Mount Nebo water tower. Presently, it needs to be repaired, sandblasted, and painted. The estimated cost for this work is up to $1.1 million, depending on whether both the exterior and interior need to be repainted. We will not know the full extent of the necessary work until the tank is drained and the inside can be assessed. $250,000 in funds remain from the hospital water tower project can be transferred to fund this work. The remaining $850,000 will need to be bonded, most likely for 20 years. The funds for debt service on these bonds will be paid from the Water Enterprise Fund. Painting the Mount Nebo water tower is a necessary maintenance activity which will extend the life of the tower for years to come. The Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Thank you. Mr. Harvey?
Thank you. So as was mentioned, the estimate for this project is about $1.1 million. We already have done an inspection on the outside. It's estimated to paint the outside and refurbishment, both of the paint as well as some safety issues for access that need to be fixed at around $600,000. So we already know what it's going to cost approximately for the outside of the tank. What we need to do next is drain it and then look inside the tank. And that'll be done during an off-peak time, probably something like in October. So the balance of we still believe the project will be about $1.1 million. This $250,000 from the savings from the hospital tank that was done a couple of years ago will be used to fund part of this, so the remaining $850,000 will go to this project. And if anybody's driven by, Mount Nebo tank, it looks like it needs it. I think everybody will agree. You don't have to be an engineer to know that.
Do we have any questions or comments on this article or the motion? If there are none, we're going to put it to a vote. It does require a 2/3 vote because it's a borrowing initiative. So all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And I'm going to deem it carries by the 2/3 required. So thank you. The Water and Sewerage Board is just one of those town boards that could use some volunteers from among our residents. If you have any background in engineering and water quality and natural resources, this is a very good example of a place where your contribution would be well received. So just let the selectmen know if that's an interest of yours. So that concludes all of the articles that were not subject to the lottery going forward. The remaining articles will be subject to the lottery. These are the articles that I mentioned earlier that are regarding town finance, have strategic implications and implications relative to the override. If Article 11 or 45 is pulled, we will consider them together. If Article 43 or 44 is pulled, we will consider them together. So this has to do with, I actually think I read an article in This Old Town by Richard DeSorger, one of my favorite readings every week. And in last week's, I think I may have solved our financial problems. He said during the 1653 town meeting, it was voted that anyone who failed to be at the annual town meeting by 9 a.m. was to be fined 12 pence. The next year, it was voted that anyone who missed a town meeting was to be fined 3 shillings and 9 pence. So we have 9,700 registered voters. If there's 800 of us here, we might want to take up some kind of an initiative to vote some kind of okay. Maybe next year. So here we go, from the lottery. The first lottery article that we will consider will be Article 17. Article 17 is an article to appropriate funds for professional counsel on the former state hospital redevelopment and environmental remediation. You can find it on page 53 of the warrant report. It was offered by the Board of Selectmen, and we have a positive motion from the Warrant Committee with Warrant Committee member Joanna Hilbert.
Move that the town vote to appropriate $75,000, said sum to be raised on the FY19 tax levy, to hire consultants, engineers, and/or attorneys to assist the town with the redevelopment/reuse of the former hospital and surrounding areas, and to advise the town on matters concerning the site's contracted redevelopment and environmental remediation, said funds to be expended under the direction of the Board of Selectmen, with the understanding that the Board of Selectmen may authorize any other town board, commission, committee, or department to expend a portion of said funds for such purposes. Said appropriation to be subject to voters' approval of a capital exclusion override pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C, so-called Proposition 2.5, Paragraph I, a half.
Thank you, and do you have a report?
I do. This article seeks funding to be allocated towards redevelopment and reuse of the former hospital and surrounding areas. The Board of Selectmen has indicated that up to $50,000 of this funding would be directed towards matching a potential state grant for the design of infrastructure improvements at the hospital site. If awarded, the grant could be up to $100,000. The remaining up to $25,000 of the funds appropriated by this motion would be directed towards consulting costs incurred by an implementation committee to be appointed by the Board of Selectmen, whose focus would be the redevelopment and reuse of the hospital site. The Medfield State Hospital land was purchased by the town in December of 2014, in large part so that the town could control the future redevelopment of the site. The current Medfield State Hospital Master Planning Committee has been working for the past 3 years to come up with a master plan to identify preferred uses at the site. The committee expects to finalize the master planning process this spring with the anticipation of a special town meeting in the fall. The Board of Selectmen has indicated that the next step in this process is to begin actively moving towards redevelopment of the site, which could include, among other things, initiating RFIs and/or RFPs with developers. The appropriation of this money will assist in that process, both in the hiring of consultants to help manage the process and in designing the infrastructure that will go along with redevelopment. Although the ultimate reuse of the hospital land is still undetermined, the Warrant Committee agrees that the appropriation of these funds is in the best interest of the town in order to continue to protect its investment in the hospital site and the future maximization of this incredible asset to the town. The majority of the Warrant Committee recommends passage.
Thank you. And we have a minority report from the Warrant Committee as well.
Yes, we do. The minority of the Warrant Committee believes that it is premature prior to the finalization of the master plan to appropriate funds for development. In the event of a special town meeting in the fall to vote on a master plan, we believe this article should be revoted at that time.
Questions and comments regarding Article 17? Mr. Harney, microphone number 1.
If I can get to it. John Harney, 17 Maplewood Road. And I am, some would say euphemistically called a supporting member or a resource member of the Hospital Reuse Committee. I have previously served on 5 earlier hospital committee and was part of the committee that negotiated the agreement with the state to enable us to buy the property for $3.1 million. Some would say that we wasted the money. I think it's just a marvelous purchase on the part of the town. If we only got the 34 acres over on the McCarthy side of the McCarthy Park side of the hospital road, it would have been well worth the 3.1. I look at what other towns have paid for their properties, and including such towns as Wellesley and so forth. They've spent enormous money recently to pick up a little bit of open land. We have open land. Why would we take a piece of property that we bought in large part because the state was going to overwhelm us with housing? They said 440 units. We've gone now, just by sheer need to make the picture perfect here, so that we could try to get a town meeting at some point to approve something. We've gone down now to 295 units, but we've been right up there. We had 20 consultants, actually developers, come in and sit around the table one time with the Hospital Reuse Committee, and all of them said, density, housing density is the only answer. The state had done its surveys, and the state said housing. So if you want a lot of housing, go along with what the hospital committee is saying is the preferred plan. I happen to advocate some housing up there, yes, but keep the land open. We don't need that land developed in the near term. That land, we know, will grow in value as the years go on.
Could I ask you to just comment on whether you are for or against the expenditure here of the
I'm against this expenditure. As the minority on the Warrant Committee says, it is untimely. The fact is, we will have, who knows, we've had 3 delayed meetings, and I think the boards of selectmen have presumed, really, on town meeting. Town meeting should be involved in what's going to happen at the hospital. And yet it seems like it's always driven by what the charge is from the Board of Selectmen to the committee, and the charge is always interpreted with silence by the Board of Selectmen that it be development. And we know that it has to be housing development. And you can see in this year's 10.4 or 10.5 possible increase in your budget that housing drives costs in every area of the town's operational budget. I urge you, vote this down. It's untimely, it's unneeded, and it's another really presumption upon this legislative body, our Medfield Town Meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Christian Donner, 92 Green Street. The motion that was read had an amount of $75,000 on the slide up there. It says 100,000. Can we have the 25,000 for the rail trail if it passes?
Okay, let's put Article 17 to a vote. And so if we would, this is to appropriate the funds for the professional counsel in the amount of $75,000 for the former state hospital. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Could I show a show of hands? Can't just tell whether we're speaking louder. Show of hands, please. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? Okay, I'm going to deem that it does not pass. Okay, the next one is Article 11. And we're going to take Article 11 and Article 45 together. Article 11 is our operating budget. You can find our budget beginning on page 36 of our report. Article 45, which will be taken up with Article 11, taken up immediately after Article 11, will be to appropriate additional funds to various fiscal year 19 operating budgets. In Article 11, what we would like to do is we would like to vote a balanced budget without holds or without amendment, and then I will reread the budget for Article 45, and we will take our holds during Article 45 so that we can consider them all together. Part of the reason for this is if we were to go to which we would be required to do under Article 5, to go to an override vote on June 11th. If that vote did not carry under any circumstance, we need to have a balanced budget in order to be able to set our tax rate. So what I'm proposing here is that we're going to vote on Article 11 first. We're going to vote if you look in the warrant report beginning at page 38, they have figures in the third column for the 2018-2019 balanced budget. I'd like to vote them as printed in the warrant. And before I do that, I guess I would get a report from the Warrant Committee. Sharon Tatro.
This budget season has been particularly difficult, one full of many pressing financial challenges. Before us tonight are many issues, and many with a variety of financial impacts. The Warrant Committee has a responsibility to the town to review all of the issues and come before you to present our recommendations. We also have a responsibility to present our town with a balanced budget for the next fiscal year. Today we are before you to present both a balanced budget and our budget recommendation, which for the first time in 7 years is not the same thing. One of the most challenging things that we all face is when we are presented with the increasing costs of items our townspeople and our town employees need. This year we are faced with large increases in health, life, property and liability insurance, which alone equals $689,435 or a 9.38% increase over last year. The two largest components of this are health insurance with a 9.12% increase equal to over $370,000, and county retirement with a 9.52% increase equal to over $220,000. Health insurance alone represents 7% of the town's total operating budget at an amount of over $4.4 million. As the town has 278 current employees taking this benefit, with an additional 296 retirees as well. Of the grand total of 574 insured employees, 75% of those are from the school department. The town has contractual obligations that we need to honor, as well as the valuable employees that we want to treat fairly. As the budget season began to wrap up and finalized numbers were available, the Warrant Committee realized that our recommendation would require an override. We will be presenting that budget in Article 45. Before we can take up the discussion of our recommendation, we are asking the town to pass a balanced budget first. The town needs a balanced budget if this town meeting does not pass Article 45 both tonight and at a special election on June 11th. Our current fiscal year ends a short 18 days after the special election, and there are state requirements to issue tax bills by June 28th. Those bills cannot be postmarked in time if there is uncertainty of a budget in place for July 1st. The balanced budget before you contains an overall 3.16% increase for the town. However, when you account for the 3% increase given to the school budget and the 9.38% increase in insurance, that only left about $330,000 or 2.96% to spread across all of the remaining town department budgets. Keeping this in mind, this budget was very thoughtfully created. It contains some budget cuts that certain department heads offered in case the need before us arised. It also ensures that critical budgets remain funded, such as insurance. In addition, it still rewards our 350 town employees with a salary increase. In past years, we would now go on to read the budget lines and have discussion on those. However, the budget that we are recommending for FY19 is going to be discussed in detail in Article 45 that we'll be taking up next. Therefore, we would like to ask that any amendments to the budget be taken up in Article 45. If there are amendments to the balanced budget that increase the amounts in Article 11, they would require an override, which is what specifically Article 45 is for. The Warrant Committee recommends passage of the balanced budget in Article 11 prior to taking up our full budget recommendation in Article 45.
Okay. Questions or comments? Microphone number 1.
Mr. Moderator, Chris Morrison, 9 Gary Drive. In view of your announced intention to read all the amounts in Article 45, I move that we waive the reading of the amounts for Article 11.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? With that waiver, I'm going to move that we approve a balanced budget as printed in the warrant report, beginning on page 38 and carrying through page 45. So that's the motion under Article 11. This requires a 2/3 vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that deems it carries. Yeah, we're going to read that next. Now that's the appropriation. Okay. Just have to wait for the calculus on this. In fact, why don't we, just in the interest of time, I'm going to move to Article 45. I'll come back and I'll read the motion for the appropriation for the balanced budget under Article 11. But why don't we start moving forward on Article 45? I'll read the line item budgets, and when I get to your line item, if you want to issue a hold, scream out hold, and we'll make a note on those, and we'll come back. This is for now Article 45. So, beginning on page 38. We have workers' compensation insurance, health and life insurance, liability insurance, unemployment compensation, Medicare insurance, county retirement contribution, selectmen salaries, selectmen operations, town administrator salaries, town administrator operations, warrant committee operations, town accountant salaries, town accountant operations, assessor salaries, assessor operations, treasurer collector salaries, treasurer collector operations, town council operations, human resource salaries, human resource operations, information technology salaries, information technology operations. Okay, we have one hold for Article 45 on information technology operations. Town clerk and election register salaries, town clerk and election register operations, Conservation Commission salaries, Conservation Commission operations, planning salaries, planning operations, zoning and appeals operations, TN Public Buildings and Property Maintenance salaries, TN Public Buildings and Property Maintenance operations, town report meeting salaries, town report meeting operations, police administrative public safety building operations, police operations salaries, police operations operations, traffic marking sign operators, fire and rescue administrative salaries, fire and rescue administrative operations, fire and rescue operations salaries, fire and rescue operations operations, inspection salaries, inspection operations, sealer salaries, sealer operations, animal control salaries, animal control operations, tree care salaries, tree care operations, highway salaries, highway operations, snow and ice salaries, snow and ice operations, strategic lighting operations, equipment repair maintenance salaries, equipment repair maintenance operations, sidewalk operations, public works utilities operations, solid waste disposal salaries, solid waste disposal operations, cemetery salaries, cemetery operations, health operations, public health nurse operations, mental health nurse operations, council on aging personnel, council on aging operations, veteran salaries, veterans operations, outreach salaries, outreach operations, park and recreation salaries, park and recreation operations, historical commission operations, grave markers, flags operations, Memorial Day, Veterans Day operations, Art Cultural Council, Stabilization, Reserve Fund, and town debt principal, town debt interest, regional vocational school operations, total of town schools, hold, water and sewer operations, water salaries, water operations, water reserve fund, sewer salaries, sewer operations, sewer reserve funds. So we have two holds relative to Article 45. We have one on information technology operations, and the other one will be the operations of school budget. Okay. Going back now, if we could, to Article 11. I'm going to read the motion, and then we will put this motion to a vote that does require two-thirds. This is the balanced budget. We move that the town appropriates $62,398,822 to the various departmental operating budgets as set out in Article 11 of the warrant report under the column headed FY19, balanced budget and/or as amended on the floor of the town meeting to defray the operating expenses for the town for the fiscal year July 1st, 2018, and to meet said appropriation, the following sums to be raised on the fiscal 19 tax levy or transferred from other available funds as follows: $20,000 from the cemetery perpetual care, $2,017,638 for the water enterprise fund, $1,681,867 from the sewer enterprise fund, $75,000 from the pension fund, $0 from free cash, $400,000 from the sewer betterment stabilization fund, $927 from the bond premiums Sawmill Brook, $2,950 from the bond premium on the June 7th issue, $2,283,000 from the bond premium on Redgate Farm, $3,000 from the bond premium on the high school field reservation, $3,683 from the bond premium on the solar array, $30,000 from the use of school property revolving funds, $4,100 from the MWPAT Title V septic loan receipts, $36,766 from the Mass School Building Authority BAN initial reimbursement, $1,163,535 from the MSB grant to offset the school debt. So the subtotal of the other revenue sources is $5,441,749,000, which would leave for our fiscal tax levy a subtotal of $56,957 and $56,957,073. And therefore, and to further provide that the appropriation hereunder shall be subject to and contingent upon an affirmative vote of the town to exempt the amounts from the limitations on taxes imposed by Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C, which is the Proposition 2.5, so-called. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so our balanced budget under Article 11 carries. Okay, so I will next go to the Warrant Committee and to see if we have a motion under Article 45.
Move that town appropriate $460,531. The amount is printed in column headed Article 45, Scenario 1, Warrant Committee Recommendations, School at 4%, on pages 15 to 17 of the warrant report, to the various departmental operating budgets, in addition to the amounts voted under Article 11, the so-called balanced budget. Said amounts to be raised on the FY19 tax levy for the purpose of adding additional funding to the FY19 operating budgets, and further provided that the appropriation hereunder shall be subject to and contingent upon an affirmative vote of the town to exempt the amounts from the limitations on taxes imposed by MGL 59, Section 21C, Proposition 2.5, so-called.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a report, please?
The school department presents unique budget considerations for various reasons. While the schools are different than other town departments in that the services they provide are not directed toward any taxpayer, our schools truly benefit us all as they serve Medfield's future, our children. It makes for a difficult and complex discussion. That Medfield schools constitute roughly 68% of the town's budget is a fact that is both inescapable and daunting. It projects to 70% this coming fiscal year. However you slice it, any increase in the school department budget above the 2.5% threshold is going to have an enormous effect on the overall town budget and, by extension, the other town departments. With that in mind and viewing the fiscal landscape of the town, the Warrant Committee determined at the beginning of the budget season that a 4% increase in the school department budget over the past fiscal year would be a fair increase. This guidance was provided to the school department and the school committee in December and has been the position of the Warrant Committee publicly and consistently throughout the entire process. Over the previous 3 years, the school budget has been increased by an average of 4.34% each year. This year's guidance is comparable to this average and identical to the percentage increase in FY17. The increase being recommended by the Warrant Committee would amount to $1,321,431. This number is roughly equivalent to the entire projected new revenue the town will have to distribute across all departments in the coming fiscal year. We believe this is a fair increase that balances the difficult financial position the town is in with the reality that schools are one of the key drivers of our town's success. For these reasons, the Warrant Committee strongly and unanimously recommends passage of Article 45 with a 4% increase in the school department budget.
Thank you. And again, reference was made by Mike Pastore to pages 15 to 17. So that's where you would be going to look at a comparison of the budget that he just recommended and moved as opposed to the budget that we just voted. So the delta between the scenario with the 3% increase versus the 4% increase is set out on those pages. So, questions, comments? Sure. Please, no.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. On behalf of the school committee, we make a substitute motion that town meeting approve the budget as reflected on pages 18 through 20 of the warrant report. More specifically, that the school budget be amended to $35,070,361.
Okay, so that's an amendment to the motion, the 4% motion made by the Warrant Committee, and that's at 6.16%.
It is.
And you can reference those numbers and that increase in the delta by looking at pages 18, 19, and 20 when you compare that to the balanced budget that we've already voted in Article 11. So everyone draw your focus to that, and why don't we have a little presentation.
On the motion, Mr. Moderator, the superintendent is prepared to give some informational slides, and then if we could speak to the motion.
Yep, great.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of town meeting this evening. As always, I'm proud to represent the 2,633 town residents that can't be here to vote this evening. We have a few slides that I want to go over this evening and talk a little bit about the difference between the 4% and the 6%. Why is it a 6.1% increase this year? And I think you have to go back to FY05 to get numbers like this in the school department. FY05, the increase was 7%. FY06, the increase was 5%. FY07, the increase was 9%. And FY08, the increase was 5.2%. So we haven't had these numbers in a long time, but I think it's important to understand the context of that this isn't the first time the school department is coming before you with an increase of over 6%. So this 6.1% increase adds a teacher in first grade, 2 teachers in second grade, 1 in third, 1 in fourth, and 1 in fifth. So we've seen a spike in enrollment in our elementary grades. Just this past summer alone, we had 104 students move into Medfield that were new to Medfield. Not all in the elementary grades, but many were in Memorial School. So we've had class sizes that are 24 and 25 in both the Memorial School and at Wheelock School. This budget also adds 2.5 special education teachers. It supports the cluster model at the Blake Middle School. So one of the things that we had done originally in that first budget, if you had gone to the public hearing, you noticed that we removed 3 teachers from Blake because we have a smaller group going through. But we got feedback and the school committee wanted to put those back in, so we ended up putting those 3 teachers back in. So it makes it a 3 cluster model at Blake Middle School just as it is today. Includes the steps and lanes and longevity and increases to teachers. So we're currently in collective bargaining with the teachers. We have not voted or ratified neither the teachers nor the school committee yet, but we're in that process right now. This budget covers all of those areas. It does reduce the funding for professional development. So we have 3 different buckets of professional development in the school department: conference and travel, course reimbursement, and then research and development. So we did not cut research and development, but we did reduce the other 2. One of the things we've worked real hard on the last 3 years is our elementary science curriculum, and part of this budget reinstates that curriculum piece, which our teachers have done a lot of training and have implemented this program. This reinstates that. We originally had cut the money out of that for next year. One important piece, it supports the upgrades to school security. I think that's something that we've all seen in the news recently. We've worked really close with the Medfield Police Department, and they've identified some areas that we need to make some improvements on in our school security. And the school committee in the town has supported capital the last 3 years in a row, totaling $100,000 in school security. We'd like to increase that a little more. It does reduce a 0.4 math teacher at the high school, and that's due to just course selection and enrollment. Increases to general education, special education, transportation. If you follow some of the issues that we've talked about at the school committee level, one of the things that we come across is the bus contract. We have to put that out to bid each year, every 3 years, and we get 1 bidder, only 1 bidder. And we do our best to get more, but only 1 bidder, so we're kind of stuck with that. So there's some increases there with both general education and special education transportation. Includes our special education tuitions. We have students that are out of district, so students that we can't educate in Medfield, we send them out of district, and that's about 23 students next year. And our support staff. So from town meeting to now, we've had additional hiring of 9 support staff, and that's really due to students that need that through their individual education plan. Again, it's a moving target in schools. It's not always what you approve that one at town meeting. There are still students that move in that have additional costs to the school department. One of the things that we've been trying to work on at the school committee level is online policy manual revision. This budget supports that. What we had to do, even though it's a 6.1, we did have to reduce our supplies and services throughout the district. So looking at principal supplies, teacher supplies, those types of things, we've had to reduce those numbers. So that gives you an overview of what the 6.1 does. Some of the reductions that we'd be looking at from a 4% increase, we'd look at teachers and related costs, so we'd reduce that 192. And again, we're not specifying grade levels here because we're not sure what that looks like right now, but those are some of the reductions in personnel. Our director of curriculum, which is a central office position, really important position that looks at the curriculum district-wide, but also oversees professional development, helps in teacher evaluation, et cetera. 140,000 there, and then that curriculum office secretary at 45. So our total payroll reduction from that 2.1% decrease is 377,000. Some of the non-payroll areas that we look at, supply services, computer replacement is a big one, $85,000. That elementary science adoption that I just spoke of, the enhancement to the school security at 130, the buildings, grounds, and maintenance, school committee expense, and athletics transportation. Total non-payroll is 335, total reduction 713, and that shows you the delta between what the school committee has approved at 6.16 in the Warrant Committee's recommendation of 4.0. And that just gives you a summary of what the original, the 4% is the Warrant Committee. The original presentation at the public hearing was 5.92, then the school committee voted at 6.16.
Thank you. Mr. Marcy, could you just go back and repeat the number at 6.16 that you had for the total school budget?
$35,070,361.
Okay, so there's between, under total school budget, under the scenario 2, 6.16 on page 20, it says 35,077,769. So I've got it.
Friendly amendment, I think there was a rounding difference between how we calculated it and how the town calculated it.
Okay, why don't we leave the number that's in the book here? Okay, just a simplicity. Other comments from the podium?
On the motion, if I may, Mr. Moderator. The school department, the school committee does not come before town meeting lightly. It's been 8 years since we've been here looking for an override. If you direct your attention, there's a chart in the warrant, which I had open to and then got distracted by the numbers, on page 21 that shows the history of overrides in the town. This is my 9th year on the school committee. It's been since 2012 that we came before you for an override. That's an unprecedented length of time in the history of the Proposition 2.5. We're quite proud of that. We're also a little ashamed of it because this operational deficit has been in place for several years. We've avoided, as best we could, coming for an override while the town had other priorities in terms of the public safety building, public works building, and we reached the point where we knew an override was becoming inevitable. The most important reason we're coming this year is that we prefer to do it in one vote rather than in a death by 1,000 cuts. Could the school department live with less than a 6.1% increase? Of course we would. Could. We would be back here next year and the year after and the year after seeking further overrides to Proposition 2.5. What we've done in the past, what we did in 2012, was seek an override that allowed us to continue to grow the district over a period of time without significant overrides. And again, we've been able to do that for 8 years. We expect this override would enable us to go a good period of time again without coming back to the voters. Education is dynamic, it's not static. We're not running factories. We're not still teaching Dick and Jane. Our enrollment fluctuates, but the cost of the district doesn't just fluctuate with enrollment. Teachers are not automats. We have different kids today than we had 7 years ago, different needs today than we had 7 years ago, and we have a different budget requirement than we had 7 years ago. So we're happy to answer questions, but that's us on the motion.
Okay, we're going to first ask if there are any questions. So before we have comments, if there's any questions, just please approach a microphone. Anybody have a question for Mr. Morrissey, Mr. Marsden? If you do, please raise your question.
Hi, Lee Treadway, 14 Kenny Road. So I just want to see if I understand this. What you're suggesting now is that if I look at page 13 with expenditures, under the Warrant Committee recommendation, we are at a deficit of $1,886,000, and with the 6.1% increase the school committee is recommending, we're at a deficit of 2.6. Am I reading this correctly? Is that what's going on here? So that the overrides will amount to somewhere in that ballpark, $1.8 million to 2.6? Is that correct? Is that a correct interpretation of this?
I don't know if that's to us, Mr. Moderator. That's the way we understand it. The difference between the Warrant Committee's recommendation and our motion is about $176 on average to the taxpayer.
I don't know what it works out to be to a taxpayer, but again, I'd just like to get my question answered.
Yeah.
I'm looking at, projected income is 66,290. Again, I'm on page 13.
Let me try to answer that. I prepared a projection of the override necessary to fund the operating budget based on what I was instructed to do, and that was to end up leaving a free cash balance at the end of town meeting of $1,750,000. Now, free cash at the end of July 1st of this year was $2,886,000. So in order to fund the deficits that are projected and to get the free cash balance to $1,750,000, these are the figures that I came up with. You would need, for the 4%, you would need an override amount of $950,000. To get to the 6.16%, you would need an override of $1,664,000. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's what I really want to understand what the impact of this is, because on 13, we have projected revenues, and it seems to me that's kind of where we start in this whole big process. What can the town expect to have for revenues, which you've got projected here as 66,290. And I'm just trying to get sort of the big picture and therefore understand what the real impact of the school board budget.
The big picture, if you take a look at the review of town finances, our total normal revenues are going up about 1.5 million. It's a little difficult at this point because the state hasn't approved the budget, and we don't know what the new growth is, but it's roughly in that range. By taking some other funding sources, for example, we have been using the reimbursement for school building assistance for the 2002 projects. That gives us about another $1,163,000, I believe. We are using $450,000 from accumulated interest on the 18 million school building assistance Bureau gave us. You add up all those things, and you come out with a total increase in revenues for the entire town budget of about 5.8%. The total budget of the town is up, I think it's in there a little over 9%, 9.3 or 9.4. So there's a gap there between the total revenues of 5.8 and the total expenditures request of the 9.3 or 9.4.
All right. And then just one other comment. I'm sure, like many other people, my taxes have gone up 30% in the last 5 years without any overrides. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, we'll have an opportunity as well for further comments. Let's stick with questions if we could, either for the folks up here on the stage or for the folks at the podium.
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to throw it out there. Do we have an option to vote on a 5.92% increase instead of a 6.16% increase for the school budget?
5 point.
The original requested one, which got most of us parents pretty much most of what we wanted.
If the amendment fails, then there could be a subsequent amendment.
Bob Slaney from 6 Overfield. Just a question, the difference between the number of teachers that are in the system between the 4 and 6%. I see you add some on the 6%, but you said to get down to the 4%, you'd have to terminate. Do you have a little clarification on how many teachers would be affected if you went to the 4%, what your
Sure.
population would be?
So some of them would be potentially new hires. So we're looking at, our budget has 6 new teachers in it, classroom teachers in it. We wouldn't be able to hire all 6 if we got the 4%. We're probably looking at hiring 2 or 3 with the 4%.
So my children are way past the school, but they benefited in the past. So what kind of a student-teacher ratio do you end up with? You mentioned the number of new students coming in, what you have to add. I presume that's not just a number that you think, what does that do to the student-teacher ratio?
We currently have in the elementary levels 23, 24, and 25 in some. This brings it all down to 20, 21, 22.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we'll entertain comments at microphone number 1 and number 2.
I'm back. I forgot to give my name last time. Renee Howley, 3 Harding Street. So as a parent of a rising 6th grader and rising 5th grader, I was one of the ones who was adamant about needing to keep the clusters at the middle school. For those of you who have kids who have aged out of the system or who are older, something to understand. My child, we moved here when he was in 2nd grade. We have lost a teacher in that grade every year since we've been here. That is why we are where we are now. We've dropped those teachers. Enrollment has increased again. You had a little blip with the classes of 25 and 26 where they were lower. We were 162 kids when I moved here. His class size now is about 182, projected to grow by another 5 kids. If we drop a cluster at the middle school, and because of the cluster model, that means dropping 3 core teachers. Our English, math, and social studies classes for our children entering adolescence, entering the peer pressures associated with social media, they are going to have class sizes of 24 or 24 kids. They do not deserve that any more than our 1, 2, and 3 grade kids deserve to have the class sizes they have today. We have a whole association of small advocate moms working for this. I don't want my taxes to go up any more than anyone else's, but our kids deserve this education that Medfield has so fantastically given them over the past few years. And I want my kids to have the same education your kids got when they went through Medfield. And they're not going to get it if we have to keep cutting teachers. Thank you.
Good.
Jack Wolf, 17 Harding Street. I've taken off my jacket so you wouldn't think I was anyway associated with the Warrant Committee. A few thoughts relative to schools. We have good schools here without any question. In fact, we have absolutely great schools. Over the past 10 years, our high school has on the average been ranked number 8. Our total school is number 16. Average that to number 12. And just think about the fact that we have 13,700 school districts across this nation. That puts us in the top 1/10 of 1% of the schools in the nation. Massachusetts, 8 years in a row, has been the best state in the nation for education. So let me assure you, for all of you in the room who are parents, we have terrific schools, and you do a great favor to the school system. You provide high intellectual content in the schools, in the children that are present in our schools. That makes education just a bit easier. Second point, Mike mentioned that 68 to 70% of your tax dollar goes to the schools. All of us as taxpayers benefit from the schools. We benefit in terms of great quality of people in the town. We benefit in terms of higher prices, higher housing prices. We also benefit in terms of having well-educated children. But let's remember that all of us pay 70% of our total tax dollar to the schools. 42% of the parents here are the ones that are benefiting from that. So of all total families across our town, only 42% have children in the schools. 58% of all the families in town do not have children in the schools. Third point, if we look across 10 years and we go back to 2009 versus the projections for 2019, at that point in time, our school budget was $26.1 million. It is now projected to be, per Jeff's discussion, $35.1 million, up $9 million. The school population has gone down from 3,002 down to 2625 right now, projected to be 2656 next year. If we just do the simplest of calculations, take the total amount that was spent, divide it by the number of children in 2009, do the same thing in 2019, there is a 52% increase in the cost, gross cost per student. 52% for basically the same product, a superbly educated child. So when someone mentions a 30% increase in their taxes, the driver for our taxes is primarily our school system. Brings a lot of benefits, but it's doing it at an increasingly rapid cost. Supporting these schools, we have a great teacher team. Without question, if we have good education, we have it because we have great teachers. But our teacher, median salary, $90,000. Median salary, $90,000. Add fringes to that, it brings it up to close to $105,000. And by the way, our teachers are contracted for a 184-day year. 184-day year for total compensation in the neighborhood of $105,000. I think that's fair, without question. And the last two pieces to think about are these. You heard that we have a $50 million school building coming up very shortly. We're clearly going to fund that. It's needed to replace the Dale Street School. $50 million in total, $30 million of which will be hitting our tax rates over time. So let me suggest that that is another major factor in school costs present. Last piece is it is seldom that the Selectmen, the Town Administration, and the Warrant Committee unanimously agree. The Selectmen, the Warrant Committee, and the Town Administration agree this year 4% is the right number for the schools. It will continue to educate our children well. As you heard from Jeff, we are not laying off our current teacher staff. We are just not hiring as many new teachers. So with that said, I would ask for an increase in the school budget of 4% as recommended by the folks at the front of the room, and we hope that you will find it in your minds to support that. Please think about that carefully. Thank you.
Jerry Potts, 7 Curve Street. So while I look at the 6.1 number, I have to admit that's higher than I personally can support. But while Jack brings up some good issues, there also are some major differences in what's happened in education over the last 10 years. While I agree with Jack, since I have 2 kids who have graduated from the high school and one is actually employed, which is great. One is a junior in college and a junior who is currently at the high school. So I have put my kids through these schools and I've reaped the benefits of that, and I feel very blessed by that. I also ran 3 years ago for school committee, and I hammered the school committee on a couple of issues. One was on special education. And while Jack makes a good point on the average student getting a great education, to be honest, Medfield did a horrible job on special education. And it's something that I think, candidly, I'm embarrassed that we allowed to happen. So I give credit to the school committee and to the superintendent for stepping up significantly in addressing what was a major shortcoming in our education. not just for the benefit of those kids, but for our community. I think it was wrong the way that we underfunded that for years. And what it led to, from a financial standpoint, is major outplacements, one of almost $300,000 that we paid for. So it was not just an economic or a social benefit to take care of special education. It's the right thing to do. It's also a financial issue. And that is very different in the last 10 years than what we experienced. So that layered in, number one, for anyone who attended the strategic planning meetings a couple of years ago, special education parents came out in large numbers, and they should have. And I give a major kudos to the school committee and the superintendent for addressing it. That's built into this number. Number two is social emotional. If you look at the Metro Ellis and Health Survey over the past few years, it is an epidemic of what's happening with student stress right now. Student stress is not addressed with large class sizes. It's addressed by teachers who get to know your kids and who can spend time in supporting them. We're not a manufacturer. My brother was a teacher for 41 years at Dover-Sherburne. And the difference that all of you, I'm sure, had of a great teacher who impacted your life, that's what the personnel is. So I can give a quote of $90,000 for the median. We still underpay relative to all the other districts. We have a much lower per capita spending on per pupil in our school. And again, I'm not saying we should go to the average, but we are well under what other districts pay that are high performing. The third and final, for any of you, and Chris and I call it date night, which is the school committee meeting we've gone to for 3 years. It's fascinating. You should all go. Or watch it on TV. The ratings have gone through the roof. $130,000 for safety. There was an incident which took place where the lights, power went out at the school, and my daughter texted me from a classroom in a lockdown where when the intercom came back on, it said it was not a drill. It was a lockdown. There were students who were locked out of classrooms, and it was because the infrastructure, which, again, the school committee had been investing to try to catch up. But sadly, what we face as a community today is that public safety in the schools is not what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so to even have minimum level of investment to make sure that our students are safe, and I wish we were in a different world, and I certainly don't condone arming all the students, right? So if we're not going to do that, the least we could do is spend the money wisely. So I don't know if 6.1 is the number, but I know 4 is not what this town has said that it wants with 20 to 21 students to make sure that we take care of our special education needs because it's the right thing to do, that we address the student stress issues that are taking place with well-qualified, well-cared-for teachers, and for public safety, we have good safety in the schools. So I don't know if it's 6.1. I think 4 is way underfunding it. But I want to appreciate that Chris Morrison and the school committee at least are raising these important issues for us to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
My name's Helen Sheehy, 9 Hillcrest Road. I know that in this matter, nobody wants their taxes to go up. And there are always two sides. Now, I speak both as a parent, as a taxpayer here, and also as a teacher. I don't teach here, I teach in the Newton Public Schools. We are paid $10,000 more in Newton than Medfield. Granted, Medfield is not Newton, okay? But the standard of education here in Medfield, we're trying to keep up with Newton. I'm not saying one is better than the other. But my point is that when you say, okay, teachers are, I respect you. You know, for me, I come from the Philippines where we have respect for the elders, but also education is very important to us. And most of us, if not all of us, moved here in Medfield, for education. Now, at some point, my own children, one who is a junior and then the other one who is an incoming freshman, they will eventually leave Medfield. They will graduate. They will carry the legacy of a good school system long past 4th year high school. Now, my point is that when you said that at 4% you can still educate the children in Medfield at that same quality, I disagree. I honestly disagree. I teach kindergarten, and I have 20 children, at least one left. That's why it went down to 21. I am stressed constantly And it's because the work is very hard. We are given a lot of mandates to make sure in kindergarten in Newton, they better read before they leave kindergarten. I mean, the standard keeps going higher and higher. The best, according to research, the best factor that will make a difference to your child's education is the teacher. It's not books, it's the quality of teachers. I am now at the top scale in our contract, and we are also negotiating our salaries. All I can say is this. In Newton, they also say, okay, you know, we're going to pit you against the other teachers because then we'll have to cut off the other teachers because these are your colleagues. It is not fair to do that. You cannot make the teachers, your children's education and your grandchildren's education on the backs of teachers. You really cannot expect quality education when you are underfunded. For instance, in the two other classrooms, there are 3 teachers in the sense that there's 1 teacher and then 2 special ed teachers. I'm the only teacher plus a special ed. My heart races all the time because we have to deal not just with education, but behavior management, special education. You need to think about that. So these teachers who are already at the top of their scale, they're not going anywhere because you see, they're too expensive to go to a different school. But you have to think of the morale of your teacher. You want your teacher to go to bat for your students, for your children. You want your teacher to do the best because we're human. You know, you have to make sure that we pay, because I'm a taxpayer here too, that we pay our teachers. And I know there are 2 sides to this. Some people say, why do you want more taxes? Okay, but then just think about that.
Thank you.
We are known for our schools.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no more questions and comments, we're going to vote on that amendment. The amendment. Final comment.
Hi, Jen Polinsky, 12 Scott Road. I wanted to note that I think it was you, Mr. Wolf, said that there's a certain percentage, a little less than half of taxpayers have children in the schools and are paying for the schools, and a little more than half don't have children in the schools and are also paying. I thought about Dr. Marsden's first comment, was that he's here representing the roughly 2,800 children who can't vote. And I think we as citizens, whether we have children in the schools or don't, we have to represent those children when they can't speak for themselves.
Okay, we had a motion at 4% offered by the Warrant Committee. It was amended to the 6.16 number. You can look at the implications of those if you compare pages 15 through 17 and 18 through 20 to see what the numbers are. So we're going to put the motion to amend to the higher number to a vote right now. So all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Could I have a show of hands, please? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Yes, excuse me. Raise your hand. All in favor, please raise your hands. And opposed? Okay, I'm going to deem that the motion to amend carries. That's the motion. Are we going to do it? You're going to do another one? No. By the way, we have not voted for the budget yet. So before you leave, we still had another hold in the budget as well that we need to go back to address. So I appreciate you came, you got what you came for, but I think another couple of minutes at least we're going to vote for the budget. Okay, let's go back and look at the other hold, if we could. Who held IT operations? Come down, please, if you would.
I'd like to say that I held it just so I'd have an excuse to stand up and walk. Steve Tower, 19 Winter Street. I am a new member here of the Medfield community. We just moved here in September. I actually kind of wish this would come up before the school committee vote, because as a father of 2 children in school, I was very much for any percentage increase the school council recommended. I just wanted to get a further clarification on the increase in the IT budget. There was like a $23,000 increase, and I just wanted to know what that was, because $20,000 doesn't really buy a whole lot for computer and networking, and I just wanted to see what that expenditure was for. Thank you.
I can answer that for you. You were talking about the operations budget?
Correct, yes.
So that is for, there's a new annual software cost for a fleet vehicle management system, and there was an online permit system as well as a new website platform. So those have to do with all of those specific cost increases.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, no motion there. So, any other further motions related to Article 45? If there are none, I will read the... Oh, got it. Oh, excuse me. Okay. That's it.
No, that's Article 11.
That was the original one. Read a new motion, taking into account the amendment. The new motion would read, under Article 45, move that the town appropriate $1,174,103, the amounts as printed in the column headed Article 45, Scenario 2, Warrant Committee recommendations, the school at 6.16%, as referenced on pages 18 to 20 of the warrant report, to the various departmental operating budgets, in addition to the amounts voted under Article 11, the so-called balanced budget. Said amounts to be raised on the fiscal year 19 tax levy for the purpose of adding additional funding to the fiscal year 19 operating budgets, and further provide that the appropriations hereunder shall be subject to and contingent upon an affirmative vote of the town to exempt the amounts from the limitation on taxes imposed by Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C, the so-called Proposition 2.5 requirement. Everybody clear? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries on Article 45. Okay. Good. Okay, back to the lottery. Next item on the lottery is, that's 46. Well, that's the free cash, so I'm going to grab another one. Okay, the next one is Article 13. Article 13 is to appropriate sums for a townwide master plan. You can find it on page 51 of the warrant report. It was brought to us by the Master Planning Committee, and we do not have a positive motion from the warrant committee. Do we have a positive motion from the floor?
You've got one over here, Scott.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. We move that the town appropriate $150,000, said sum to be raised in the FY19 tax levy for the purpose of preparing a townwide master plan, said appropriation to be subject to voters' approval of a capital exclusion override pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C, so-called Proposition 2.5, Paragraph I and a half.
Thank you. And do we have a A report from the Warrant Committee. Tom?
We do. Article 13 has a requested appropriation of $150,000 to begin the process of updating our town's 1964 master plan. The fundamental attributes include manage growth and change, provide for orderly and predictable development, protect environmental resources, set priorities for developing and maintaining infrastructure and public facilities, strengthen local identity, create framework for future policy decisions, and promote open and democratic planning. The Commonwealth does require that an updated master plan needs to include the following elements: statement of goals and policies, land use, housing, economic development, natural and cultural resources, open space and recreation, services and facilities, circulation, implementation. Please note that very often communities supplement the aforementioned elements. It will take 1 to 2 years to complete, with that being contingent on a number of factors: who is in charge, the public process, the relevance of the existing plan, the degree of agreement and disagreement about major community issues, our planning and zoning track record, a budget component, and for certain, the Warrant Committee would strongly urge an element, or elements plural, that relate to long-range revenues and expenditures. And finally, a review and synthesis of the MSH-MPC conclusions. We do need to update our town-wide master plan, but to hire a consultant for fiscal year 2018 at a fee of $150,000 is money spent in the wrong area at the wrong time. Kindly note that we have spent upwards of $3 million in consulting fees over the last 5 years in areas that have resulted in essential and critical support for the basic services that our residents expect. However, with due and proper respect to the hardworking selectmen and fellow Master Plan Steering Committee members, all of whom support this article, we can wait another year to consider, calculate, and allocate the resources to the more pressing financial matters that confront our town. The Warrant Committee recommends dismissal.
Okay, questions and comments regarding Article 13?
Mr. Moderator, may I be heard?
Please.
On this, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. So I think we disagree strongly with the Warrant Committee's view on this. I mean, the master plan has been kicking around for several years. We have a number of development issues around the budgets, around planning that we're talking about, and we end up talking about them in a piecemeal fashion. We end up talking about Medfield State Hospital, we talk about Lot 3, we talk about this. At some point, we're going to have to talk about what to do with the Dale Street location if that school moves. We talk about where the Parks and Rec facility might go, but we talk about them in a siloed way and in a separate way. And I think the Board of Selectmen, myself included, Gus wasn't here last year, you can't blame him, but I think we made a mistake in not pushing this last year because we should have done this sooner rather than later. So it's not so much that this can wait, it's that we're probably a year late at this point. We have a number of these key issues. Now, look, Medfield has been built out considerably since 1964, and so this is not going to be recommending tearing up anybody's homes, but we do have some of these strategic questions. For example, one of the key questions we have and one of the key goals that the Board of Selectmen has identified, and something that runs through all of our discussions tonight, is the need to increase our commercial tax base. And the locations where people want to develop commercial property are different in 2019 than they were in 1964. You may have noticed no one is building big box tech companies' headquarters 20 minutes from the highway and away from the train. So we have to identify in our planning and our zoning where we can enhance our commercial property base to take some pressure off our residences. We also have to deal with the future of some of our municipal buildings and municipal property, specifically the Dale Street location if the new Dale Street is someplace else. And we can't look at that just in isolation and say, well, it might be good for this, it might be good for that. And so we think this master plan is important. We think it'll take a year, maybe a year and a half, but if we don't do it, we're not going to have an overall vision. We're not going to get input from people in the town on these collective issues, which includes Medfield State Hospital, but we can't look at that in isolation either. We can't just say, well, let's look at that piece and just do what we want to do there. We have to look at it collectively. So it's $150,000. We propose to pay for it with a one-shot capital expenditure outlay, which means it would be on your taxes for 1 year and then it would go away. It's been a long time since 1964. Things have changed. We need to address these issues, and the Board of Selectmen would like to push these forward. And so we appreciate the Warrant Committee's fiscal concern, but this is an area where the long term has to win out over the short term, and we recommend approval of this article.
Other questions and comments regarding this article? Okay, if there are none, we're going to vote on the motion. The motion that the town appropriate $150,000 said subdivision.
Moderator.
Hi, Doug Morrison, 12 Orchard Street. Does the town have a town planner? Just concerned that we're hiring consultants when we should have, might have an internal person who can do this.
So I can respond to that. And when we got a report last year from the Master Plan Steering Committee, they laid out sort of 3 different ways to do this. And one way to do it is with a combination of internal resources and volunteers. That's a longer process because the town planner has a full-time job as it is. If you do hire a consultant, you can do it in a shorter time period because the state requires a substantial amount of public input in managing the public input sessions. I work with the town planner a lot on issues, and she doesn't have a ton of extra time in her day to do this. And so you could do it that way. It would probably be, I think the estimate from the steering committee was maybe a 3 or 4 year process if you tried to do it with a combination of it. You could do that. It would just take longer, and we would be that much more delayed in getting started on some of these things. So that's another option if we do it. I don't know how much I'm looking over at Sarah. She's probably getting a resume going right now if this is what we do, but
Sorry.
you know, it's a possibility. It just takes longer.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, the motion on the floor. Move that the town appropriate $150,000 said sum to be raised on the fiscal year 19 tax levy for the purpose of preparing a townwide master plan. Said appropriation be subject to voters' approval of a capital exclusion override pursuant to GL, Chapter 59, Section 21C, the so-called property 2.5 override. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Raise your hand if you would. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? One more time if you would. All in favor? Thank you. All opposed? I'm going to deem that it carries. Okay? Good. Okay, we're now at the point of quandary that I referenced earlier. It is almost 11:15. This means that we are out of time, subject to overage time. We have our capital budgets to do. We have to consider whether we will appropriate funds for park and recreation. We have to consider whether we will appropriate funds for the center. We will consider advanced life support. We will need to look at whether we're going to vote for a stabilization fund and to appropriate the funds to authorize borrowing for Dale Seat School. I'm going to deem that we cannot get those done in the next half hour. I'll see you tomorrow at 7:30. I'll take a motion to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.